morning, Hiteshi.
Good morning, Imaniji.
We have too many launches today.
Yeah, that is where I was like too many things happening. So
thank you for joining. Okay, good morning, everybody. This session is live from the last 5 minutes. My name is Imani Kumar. Maybe we will wait for a minute or two and then we will start the sessions. Thank you all for joining this India webinar. Okay. Good morning again. Thank you all for joining this KASpaces India webinar, which is jointly organized by the Conrad Adenauer Foundation and ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability South Asia. Thank you and welcome to all of you. My name is Imani Kumar. I'm Deputy Secretary General looking after the Asia Pacific region of ICLEI, ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, and also the Regional Director with ICLEI South Asia Office. Just to tell you about ICLEI, ICLEI is a city association, a 30-year-old city association, which represents more than 2,500 cities all over the world. That includes 100-odd cities in South Asia. And we are closely working with the various city governments and also the subnational and national governments in South Asian region that includes India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan. We are happy today. We are partnering with the Conrad Adenauer Foundation to look into the objectives of SDGs and how the implementation is happening on ground about the sustainable development goals. Without wasting time, as we have very less time today, and we also have, I'm happy that two of distinguished speakers for our first session, or maybe I will say three of the speakers. One is Mr. Ashley, who is the director from the Conrad Adenauer Foundation. And we also have Mr. Hitesh Vaidya as the director from National Institute of Urban Affairs. He's a premier institute. And I'm happy that Mr. Vaidya has joined us with his busy schedule today. And we also have Dr. Rajesh Kumar is also joined us for the opening session. The session is more on today. For the first half an hour, we will have on the opening session. And then we have three technical sessions. This technical session one is on sustainable urban development and internal migration. As you all know that during the COVID pandemic, a lot of things have happened in India. So we are going to discuss more on how the pandemic has really changed the migration activities in India. And then we also have urban climate resilience and sustainable transport. These are the two sectors which have come out as one of the important sectors in Indian context under the sustainable development goals. And then we will have a closing session at the end. And just to tell you the ground rules, I request everybody to keep your maybe videos on if you can, all the speakers. and keep your mics off at a mute mode. If you want to raise any questions or ask any questions to the speakers, I request you to use a Q&A below the screen or chat. You can use that, or raise your hand. Maybe moderator will ask you to speak and ask the questions. We request all the moderators maybe to please be on time, and we will have more discussion today on various questions which are coming up on the topics. And as I said, that maybe use the chat box if you want to raise any questions or if you have any concerns, we will try to answer all that. So with this, without wasting any time, I request maybe Mr. Ashley is the director from the Conrad Adenauer Foundation from Singapore to say a few words. Mr. Ashley, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. Dear Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, dear Dr. Rajesh Kumar, dear Emani Kumar, dear speakers and ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome from Singapore, from the Conrad Adenauer Foundation's Political Dialogue Asia, for this webinar on the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular Sustainable Development Goal number 11 on sustainable cities and communities for India. It's wonderful to see that all of you are able to make time today at the beginning of the week to discuss this very important topic with us. Please allow me to quickly introduce Conrad Adenauer Foundation. We are a German political foundation. We are active with over 100 offices worldwide, and we work on human rights, on democratization, on the rule of law, on innovation, and in particular on the achievement, the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals. For the Sustainable Development Goals, we have created the brand of KASpaces. KASpaces is a platform where we want to bring together actors from the civil society, from academia, and from the policy-making sector to discuss how we can best achieve the Sustainable Development Goal by 2030. In particular, given the fact that COVID-19 is posing a huge challenge to most of the Sustainable Development Goals. We are very happy that we found a wonderful partner in ICLE for the discussion of Sustainable Development Goal 11 and the Sustainable Development Goals that are connected with sustainable cities and communities. And we are now in the process of having a total of 10 national workshops. India is the second. And we are going to have a final regional workshop at the end of the year, where we try to look into the best practices that we have collected in the different countries to see how we can best further the Sustainable Development Goal number 11. We are focusing on the three topics that Emani Kumar has just mentioned. We believe that they are not only relevant for India, but really for the whole region. So we are trying to have this discussion, similar discussions in all the 10 countries, but really to look under the different circumstances, under the different framework, how each country has found solutions to come closer to reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. We really want to have a look at the whole country, not only at the capitals or the economic centers. We are really trying to focus on best practices, maybe some of them who have also existed before COVID-19. As I said, COVID-19 has created a whole new set of challenges, but we really want to have a wholesome perspective on the efforts that are taken in the different sectors of public life to get closer to the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And I do believe that with the very renowned speakers and experts that we have for today's program, we will be able to get a very significant outcome of this discussion today. India is, of course, the key country in South Asia and also one of the key countries in the whole region of Asia on the way to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you once again to all of you for making time. Thank you to Emani Kumar and his team for the wonderful work that they are doing with ICLE and also in this cooperation. And last but not least, I would also like to thank my colleague Mega Sama, who's our program manager for the Sustainable Development Goals, who has put a lot of effort into creating this platform and to kind of come up with the idea for this series of workshops. Thank you again to all of you. I look forward to a fruitful and interesting exchange. And with that, back to you, Iman Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Ashley. Thanks for all the support and as an organizing partner, I think for this particular webinar, not only for India, as Mr. Ashley said, we are also going to do it in total. We are doing in 10 countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia, and this is the second in the series. Thank you, Mr. Ashley and Ms. Megha for all your support. As I said that we have two very distinguished speakers, and the first speaker, I'm happy to say that he is also my friend, and Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, who is the director with the National Institute of Urban Affairs. Mr. Vaidya has worked in this field for more than 25 years now, sustainability and urban field. And recently, I think 2 years back, he took over as the director of National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is one of the premier institute in the urban field. And he actually transformed NIU in last 2 years, maybe I can put it that way publicly now. And he also worked previously with UN Habitat, looking after the new urban agenda. So I thought that he's the best speaker to introduce the situation on the sustainable development goals and the urban policy, what is happening in India. And I'm happy that he has agreed to be with us for at least maybe 10 minutes. No, he's few more launches today for him. Thank you, Mr. Vaidya, for joining with us, and the floor is yours to you, sir.
Thank you, Imaniji, Ashley, and all the participants and panelists who are there on the platform today. I'm really, really delighted to be part of this platform where different stakeholders from different spheres of policy, practitioners, and industry have gathered to discuss ways of sustainability for the future of our cities. And you know, sustainability, SDGs particularly, Ashley just now talked about, bringing different best practices from a different part of the world and doing this series. I think this is the biggest contribution based on to the humanity which will happen, because no one has an answer how to implement SDGs. And learning from each other, even though we all agree that there will be no one size which will fit all, but we definitely collectively we can, jointly, collectively learning from each other, we can bring the answers and reach the envisaged objective of Agenda 2030 together. So thank you for organizing, and ICLEI has been a great support to NIUA over the last 2 years of my work, and to the sector here in the country. So thank you for organizing this with the partnership KASpaces, Mr. Imani Kumar. See, while we are discussing about the future of cities, this is very nice word to say sustainability and all, but I'll just talk very practically. While we are discussing what should be the future of our cities, and that's what we are not discussing about. We are discussing about future of ourselves. Where will we go from here? What are the cities? And COVID has really, really shown us the challenges COVID has put on us. We need to really start thinking of different disruptive technologies, different ways of doing things, a disruptive way of influencing and strengthening our responses towards managing cities. And I think SDGs gives a lot of guiding, establish a lot of guiding principles to move towards that direction. And while we all talk about cities as engine of economic growth, we all talk about cities as need to improve their productivity. Cities need to improve their competitiveness. I think we all need to really look at it that our actions, which we are doing, should be on the larger SDG objective, which is leave no one behind. And that is where we should be really embedding all our efforts, is not what is there, but how do we make our SDGs goal more inclusive? How do we mainstream SDGs within our day-to-day actions? I think that is the challenge which we have to do it. So in my opinion, if I have to say, we are not going to talk about investor-friendly cities or competitive cities, but I think the focus should be how cities should be more people-friendly. And that is what COVID, the response from the COVID which came up was this lot of groups, they just emerged. There was an ecosystem which was there, but nobody knew, and they emerged. They started helping, and they started linking themselves with the local bodies. So how do now this new ways of working with the cities which has come up during the COVID, and how do you institutionalize that? And that is going to be the main area where we make, how do we learn from the citizens? How do we, as a city, give back to the citizens? How the interaction between the city and the citizen really should be nurtured? And I think that is the challenge which we need to really imbibe in our moving forward when we talk about business, move away from business as usual approach to a new approaches. I think that's where we need to really think about. And I think the SDG goal as a new urban agenda, Paris Agreement, we have had all this global thinking in 2015. Right now we have 2020. We have another 10 years to go. While I think, how do you percolate, and that's the challenge, how do you percolate this knowledge which has come from the global thought leaders to the local level is going to evolve. And the challenge is not, we all talk about it, we all have, there's so much of knowledge which our previous generation may not have. We have Google, we have all the podcasts, we have webinars, and particularly during this whole last 2 years. But the question is, move away from knowledge, but start applying this knowledge. There's no lack of knowledge. There's how do you apply this knowledge and move towards action? And I think the challenge of SDGs, challenge of everything is on actioning them on the ground. And I think that's where we need a lot of working together, a lot of thinking, a lot of partnerships, a lot of collaborative efforts, because we all talk about it. We all have a great knowledge. And I think this knowledge which is there now on the platform or on the country which we give is enough for us to move. But the challenge is I again say there's only 3 things which we need to do: action, action, and action. Because otherwise we will be missing the bus. So, looking at what are the 5 things which all these 3 global frameworks talk about. They talk about that there should be a great urban policies. We should have a policy enabling environment, which helps, or a mandate for urban local bodies to really start actioning them. So what is that policy environment which we have created? And with the India Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs have really launched these 5 flagship missions. And if you look at these 5 flagship missions, they talk about the urban ecosystem one way or the other. And they are linked with that. So how do you align these policies and create a policy framework? While they are missions, I think we need to take away from the missions and saying that what is that outcome which we want to achieve from these missions, and how these missions are really aligning with this broad SDG goals. So I think policies have to be done. Then second thing, which is planning, principles of planning, which need to be established. I'm right now at NIUA, we are working on master plan of Delhi 2041. When I joined 2 years back, I was thinking, I'm preparing a master plan for Delhi 2041. Do I know what Delhi will be tomorrow? Or is there a planner on earth who can tell what Delhi will be in next 20 years? The idea is we are not, it's not just a land use plan which we will be preparing how Delhi will shape up, but it is what are those planning principles which we can establish that not only Delhi, but all the emerging cities which are coming, which are growing working in an urban hierarchy. How do they establish those principles, and how, as a National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is a think tank of our Government of India, can create those templates for establishing those planning principles. So I think for all of us, that's the biggest challenge. How do you really establish these planning principles? Third thing is, while we are planning, I think it has to be rules and regulations, and that's the new urban agenda. 3 principles talk about planning, policy, and rules and regulations. But more than that, I think we need to also talk about the financing. How do you make these urban local bodies more credit worthy? How does this urban local bodies, where the action is there, has a more empowerment to take those financial decisions? And lastly, it has to be focused on implementation, a local implementation, and that requires hand-holding, capacity building, and also a lot of evidence-based research. And I think that's the area where we all need to bring a lot of best practices, which KASpaces is trying to do right now with the clay. Bring those practices, create that platform where cities can start linking and seeing, okay, if this can happen in there, how I can contribute. You can't just pick up a best practice and put it here. It has to be contextualized. It has to be localized. It has to be more oriented toward the skill sets which the urban local bodies are within the mandate of urban local bodies. But at least this gives a platform where you can start having a dialogue and deliberation, and this works there and why it can't work here. And I think this is a great opportunity for us now with this type of a platform and a partnership which ICLE and KASpaces are working on to really create this, not only leave it as a loose platform, but institutionalize it. Institutionalize it within the system that everybody knows there is this platform of best practices where it can go and start looking at it, where it can start interacting with it. So how do we create those type of a knowledge platforms which moves towards the impact, which moves towards the not only knowledge generation, but towards creating impacts at the local level. You know, with this COVID, we all saw about technology and data which has emerged and made our life much more easier, which also helped us in addressing the challenges of COVID. And imagine same type of technology and data if we can use that in our city governance issues. How best or how responsive we can make our cities to be. So, and I think these experiments with technologies has definitely helped in breaking down the silos and move away from dissecting to a comprehensive and integrated solutions to not to accommodate growing needs of services, but also to bring efficiency in city operations. And I can see, you know, the response of Indian cities, particularly COVID, and our integrated command and control center. And I was a part of when the integrated command and control centers were established were proposed in 2015. Everybody thought we are creating the white elephants, and they will be just a money wasted. But today, when you look at integrated command and control center, they became a first port of call when they started addressing the situation, where they started creating those hotspots. They started responding to the needs of the health sanitation workers, responding to the needs of the citizens. I think that is the thing. It has to be not a short-term thinking, but a long-term visioning. And I think India, in that way, I will say that India has taken that long-term vision perspective rather than the ad hoc gains, which can be like a populist game, but thinking of how in the long term how we can really address that 2030s basic agenda, which is to leave no one behind. But again, all these words are good, but it talks about moving forward is integration, partnerships, and actions. Without these three keywords, whatever we are saying will be just another webinar. So I particularly request that if this series which we are creating can result to some kind of actions, which can create then or applying this, create some kind of a tool which can then be applied, or instrument which can be applied to bring that change which we all want. But you know that it's not just a webinar, but any change which we want to do has to be planned, designed, and implemented and managed. And as an NIUA, I am willing to partner and give this platform, which has a convening power with the urban local bodies, to work with you to plan, design, implement, and manage this platform of sharing of best practices. We all talk about things are not happening. We just did a climate assessment framework, which is looking at how cities are mainstreaming climate in their day-to-day operation. And we just finished on 25th of June, the results were out. And if you see, and I'm just giving out 126 cities, 28 indicators we mapped, and see where are the cities in India, what are they doing. And I was surprised that while we are doing, all the cities on their own also are doing a lot of good work. And I think we need to celebrate that good work because, it's not only being harsh what we can be done, but small things which cities have done. I think it's a time to celebrate and improve on it and handhold them to do further. But if you give me results broadly of Indian cities towards sustainability, which is the topic of the day, I think 35 cities have initiated preparation of city disaster plans. 101 cities have started promoting green buildings. And 19 cities have achieved the national air quality standards. 67 cities have initiated water resource management. 45 cities are scientifically managing landfill sites. 35 cities have actually developed clean air action plans. And 88 cities have converted all street lights to energy efficient or renewable energy operations. So if that is even in a small constituency of 126, this is the result. And if you look at a 4,000 urban local bodies, idea is now what we have achieved in 127 cities, how do you scale up to 4,000 urban local bodies? As a partner institution like KASpaces, ICLEI and all, the challenge should be the scale up. To this, there is no easy answer. How do you scale up that other 4,000 urban local bodies, start replicating, start doing these things, what handhold we can support them? That's the challenge which we need to. So the discourse need to focus on how these tools which we are creating, how these instruments which we are creating are going to add value in synergizing and integrating different elements of cities to foster inclusive urban societies. Urbanization, we all know, will continue, and so one aspect or other. And while we are looking at what future holds for us, it's clear there is no room for contentment. I think that's the key focus has to be implementation, and only proper implementation of these instruments will be the pudding on the cake, because all of us are doing a lot of good work. But I think we need to collaborate and collect together rather than working in silos. We have to share our experiences. We have to start discussing. We have to come up with a lot of learnings, and we have to come up with those guiding tools which we can handhold cities to a next level. I understand the very purpose of gathering here is not only to share experiences, but to scale and multiply these islands of successes to become more inclusive and integrated. Last but not the least, I hope this conference inspires all of us to continue to strive for excellence and to continue working towards building healthy, safe, and sustainable urban future for all of us. So with that, I thank you, Imaniji, ICLEI, and KASpaces for inviting me to address this webinar. And I am always available for any further discussion, and my institute will be more than happy to collaborate, taking the lessons from this different webinar series which you are developing to a larger constituency of urban local bodies in India, so they can also learn from the good work happening across the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hitesh. I think very important points you have mentioned. I don't want to repeat. I think the one word you have said is action and implementation and scaling up. I think that summarizes the points what you have clearly said. Thank you, sir, for joining us this session during your busy schedule, and we are happy that we listened to you. I will, if your time permits, you please stay on for 10 more minutes. Otherwise, you are free to leave us.
Definitely, I have as you said, too many launches today, and I am trying my best to move from launches and lunches to actually actioning. So please excuse me for today. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. We also have Dr. Rajesh Kumar, IFS is the director from COVID-19 core team, Department of Health and Health Research, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, who has done a very important role for the last 1.5 years during the COVID time. I'm happy that he is with us, and I request him to give his keynote. Dr. Rajesh, the floor is
thank you
yours.
so much. Can I have the permission to share the screen?
Dr. Rajesh, you can share your screen.
We can't still see your screen, sir. Maybe can we share the presentation? You can say next. Yeah, we can now.
Is it visible there?
Yes,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Dr. Hitesh spoke in length about the overall ecosystem in which we have to work, and also he highlighted about the policy contours for us we have to trace, and emphasized on the actionable agendas we have to follow. So I would take further lead from that, and I will try to adduce some evidence that we can plug in from the experiences we learned from across the cities in the world while responding to COVID-19. As we know, COVID-19 has been unprecedented, but the experience of cities with pandemics has not been unprecedented. Cities as centers of activity and innovation have been evolving with technologies and experience, and have been evolving to respond to various levels of risk. Might be pandemics, might be climate change risk, and they have been demonstrating as well. And I hope our cities will also take that lead forward. And we can trace this evidence right from 13th century bubonic plague to the current times. But the current times has challenged the cities in terms of its basic functioning. Like our cities have got organized as massive centers of innovation, development, and unfortunately, this time the COVID-19 has opened a new area of engaging with urban life. Perhaps we have to pick up from there and look for engaging with the system to make it more resilient. So in this context, I'll be sharing certain perspectives from an ecosystem point of view. I'm sure that other colleagues in the event will be discussing on the socio-political and economic and governance aspects of adding more resilience to the cities. So here we can see how our cities really were the brunt of this pandemic, and we know the stories behind it. As we can see here, 90% of the COVID cases have been reported from urban areas, and clearly cities have been the epicenters of such infections. This points a strong finger to the resilience of the cities to respond to sudden risk. And again, to qualify the first statement, we observe that states with a high proportion of urban population had greater risk for such infections. Maybe this is also compounded with the underlying causes and the lifestyle patterns that are prevalent in cities. And again, aligned with the density and the constraints in the urban planning. Now, to summarize, 9 large cities rather accounted for majority of the cases in the country. So what could be the major drivers? Of course, drivers could be many, but on a sort of apparent analysis, we can just put some of these drivers across population density, concentration of activities, and vulnerable stressors. And stressors could be like from nature, could be climate change related, or maybe due to geographic reasons, or maybe due to man-made issues as well. Now the challenge is how to adapt and evolve with the different sort of such things in the times to come. That's where we have to perhaps focus on what Dr. Hitesh mentioned about action. But I would qualify adding one more point, that is action with evidence and arrangement for monitoring, verification, and reporting. I think that is the trajectory perhaps we have to take. So in my brief interaction over another 4 minutes, I will focus on how the environmental quality, the water cycle concepts, and urban spaces have been influencing the pandemic's prevalence and incidence, and what evidences we have, and what clues we can take from them to add actions to bring more resilience to such a context in the coming times. Now, looking at the environmental concerns, there have been lots of reporting, rather like several floods of reporting about COVID-19 over the last 1.5 years since first day. And evidence very clearly says that there have been strong association between COVID-19 transmissions and loss of life and high levels of air pollution. This has been a fact that has been air talking for long, but we often used to get afraid when air quality levels drop. I mean to say, like negative side, air quality levels climb up, then we get very sensitive. But this time, it really impacted the urban dwellers. For example, the validated information from northern Italian regions, it has been very clear that the air pollution levels significantly influence the transmission. And of course, the long-term exposure adds to the vulnerability. This is common to all the cities with the high levels of air pollution levels. So now we have the common pollutants, the gaseous pollutants, SO2s, NO2s, SO2, COs, and the O3s. And also we have particulate pollutants, which are commonly expressed as particulate matter 2.5 and particulate matter 10 in simple terms. But now, if we look at the studies, we can clearly make out certain discernings. The first is that as a response to COVID-19, many countries have put in lockdown. Of course, that was a measure to prevent the spread and prevalence of the disease and its incidence. But that was also an opportunity to understand how effective our frameworks and systems work otherwise. If we just look at the impact of such movement restrictions on emissions of carbon dioxide, NO2s, SO2s, and O3, we can clearly see that they have come down in certain parts of the world, and in certain parts they haven't. So where it came down, we can clearly put an inference that it was due to the lockdown effect on transportation. But in certain places, the population levels remain high despite that. So the evidence indicates that it is not the transport sector that was not responsible, but it was the other sectors. Maybe it's from mining, or it's maybe from biomass burning, which is common in many parts of the south. And the pollution level continued, particularly with respect to particulate matters. And certain other observations like ozone. Ozone is a poisonous gas, but in the natural situation, it interacts with other gases. Maybe it makes more compounds with other pollutants like NO2s and SO2s. But in the absence of such gases, the ozone concentration also goes up. So this also is a matter which needs to be like a very strategically addressed. The point here is that when we try to look at reducing a particular level of pollutant, it can prove harmful from a public perspective or from a health perspective as well. So this is one learning which we can pick up for our future engagements of pollution management. So what is apparently there in the general response arrangement is, yes, we have to focus more on traffic related pollutions. Yes, that is true. But the response also say that we have to look at from a landscape perspective, which will include other sources of particulate pollutants. For example, agriculture burning. But the lockdown was not there, the agriculture burning continued. It created particulate matter in several parts of the world. So the pollution levels still continued, and it was adversely affecting the health prospects, because any point of substratum is to that extent. We can infer that way as well. So the point to summarize is that it affects the coping capacity of the infected individuals, and definitely improving air quality can contribute to address several of the underlying causes, or even like the prompting causes for making people vulnerable for COVID-19 and such pandemics. Of course, these are quite apparent at this moment in terms of observations. Maybe we needed more studies to really establish them, but clues are enough to steer our policy and action to put more amounts of resilience in our cities' dynamics. Now let's look at how it went down with the water cycles in the city. Of course, the countries or the geographies in the south and other parts of the world are much dependent on natural water sources. Of course, because of lockdown restrictions, there have been some sort of a like gap, which we can call it as a positive gap or other ways for the water bodies to recoup, though the gap in time was very less. But this could also be seen as a source of action we have to follow, because this provided an opportunity to estimate at local level how fast the water bodies can recoup. And based on that, definitely local level actions can be piloted upon. At the same time, we need to be extremely careful of the threats to water bodies because of the COVID-19 engagements. It could be in terms of the pollution caused by the drugs. We have evidence from South Africa. There are evidences about the antiretroviral drugs went into water. We also sometimes hear to some extent such instances about antimicrobial drugs getting leaked to water sources. Secondly, these sort of wastewater treatments, which are not very carefully addressed, can also lead to further transmissions. They have also been reported. But some studies from India, particularly just for our interest, during lockdown times, it was recorded that the bacterial pollutants in the groundwater, so also the chemical pollutants went down. So now we have some evidence, even in our landscape and from other landscapes across the world, how water bodies have been responding to change in the utilization pattern, and how they have become more like prone to risk due to our engagements in management policies. So the message for the local bodies could be that we have to have a separate action plan, which is looking at the whole chain of networks which are linking water bodies to the other utilization points in the urban landscape. So that's the message perhaps we have to consider. And of course, for the resilience in the long term, definitely the urban bodies and cities can engage with the disinfection of water plants, which is already an actionable point happening, and then regular monitoring of wastewater data. So data-driven sort of management action, which is what I highlighted in the beginning about evidence-based engagements with MRVs. I think they should be the backbone of early warning systems for cities to respond to different sort of risks, not only a health risk like a COVID-19 pandemic. It could be a sort of early warning for other climate change related risks, or maybe sort of local pandemic or anything of that sort. So now to the open spaces. Yes, we have heard a lot of talk about the requirements of open spaces during this pandemic because of the restrictions. People felt it very hard to really like engage with their activities, which they have been doing otherwise for health benefits. But cities can very synergistically think at this moment about having very clearly defined, functionally designed public spaces. These functionally designed public spaces can have movement corridors, for example, like to schools, to workplaces, or dedicated cycling paths for active transport. In fact, we have seen many countries very momentously transforming their public spaces to accommodate such requirements. We have evidence from Paris and so also similar other cities. Which dedicated considerable action to create public spaces for action and engagement, particularly for physical activity, including locational access to healthcare. So these are some of the points which I wanted to highlight. Now coming to the context of sustainable development in our country, as you can spot here, this is the latest publication of NITI Aayog on SDG India, which was released a couple of weeks before. And this tracks the actionable agenda under goal number 11. So goal number 11 is quite exhaustive and comprehensive. but the attracted indicators are quite limited. And we can see that we still have an option to work on the sewerage treatment capacity to the sewerage generated. So there is a dip. The other ways, the rest of the indicators are moving up. So the point here is that gaining lessons from the experience of COVID-19, definitely when the cities and urban bodies prepare their action plans, they can put in a lot of such inputs and a lot of such levers for adding resilience to their city landscapes. So this is very illustratively mentioned by this UN Secretary General. This is an opportunity. Every investment now going is an opportunity to turn COVID-19 recovery into a real opportunity for ever shaping a healthy and resilient future, as cities have already been in more years. Few suggestions at this moment is we have to go forward with an evidence-based, participatory and efficient urban planning based on experience so far. This has been highlighted by the previous year as well. And to meet this, perhaps we need to invest more on capacity development and engagement, as evidence-based really need capacity to really assess the situation and evaluate the evidence, and also to put in MRB protocols. And that will again call for greater resource support to local self-governments, and it will be like more robust with the partnerships and peer learnings between cities, academia, policy think tanks, and inclusive and participatory planning at local level, and promote context-specific synergies and trade-offs that are accommodated in planning space. But just at this moment, on the last point, I just wanted to add that right now in COVID-19 testing, many of the city governments, even local self-governments, are involved in terms of expanding the testing capacity and reaching out to the people for carrying out tests, and also in creating demand for testing. So these are wonderful opportunities for local self-governments to gain experience firsthand and build those validated pieces of local experience into their own local planning and build sustainability at local level. With that, I think maybe in the coming sessions, a few of the questions we can think of to address what sort of innovative actions at local and regional and national level could be thought of, and partnerships that city can forge at regional level. And then what sort of areas can be identified for evidence-based implementation projects and MRVs for monitoring them through capacity building. I think the conference will also deliberate, and I wish the remaining sessions all the best. Thank you so much. And I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Imani Kumar and Dr. Christine Isle for this opportunity. Thank you so much for all the participants for patiently having me speaking and listening to me for this semester. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh Kumar. I think very interesting, and the 3 points what you have said about air quality and water and urban spaces. KASpaces is different maybe from the urban spaces, but we are happy to deliberate on your questions. And I think those are the points maybe all our next speakers in the next 3 sessions can take it forward. Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts. And maybe we will come back to you if we have more questions. And I also request you, if you have time, please stay on for the entire session and see how the cities are responding to your questions, sir. Thank you. Thanks again. Without wasting any time, I think.
I have to and also
so your voice is cracking. I think maybe I'll come back. Without wasting our time, I think we are already late. We are going to the technical session 1. And again, I'm happy that we have 2 distinguished speakers and 2 discussants with us. The first speaker is Dr. Rajan, is the Director for Center for Heritage, Environment and Development, CHED, Kochi Municipal Corporation. Thank you, Rajan sir. Thanks for joining us. I think you and in your city are not only in city of Kochi, but also all over the world, Kochi's best practices have been talked about. So I want to request you to share your experiences in Kochi and whatever ideas you have and you have implemented in the city of Kochi. That is one. And we also have Dr. Debalina Kundu. She's a professor from National Institute of Urban Affairs, NIUA. And Dr. Kundu has worked for the last 15, 20 years in the migration and in the cities and urban spaces. So we are happy that both of them are here with us in this session. So I request both of you, maybe first Dr. Rajan and then Dr. Kundu, if you can share 4 to 5 minutes your thoughts at the beginning, and then I will ask both the discussants, Dr. Seema from Department of Geography from University of Delhi, and also Ms. Mukta Naik, fellow from Center for Policy Research, CPR. Both of them, if they can add and reflect on both the presentations, and maybe if you can add also your points on the sustainable urban development and internal migration. So without wasting any time, I request Dr. Rajan to share his views. Dr. Rajan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning, Dr. Manikumar, and I'm really thankful to you, ICLEI, and all others for inviting me to be part of this very important discourse. And today we are deliberating upon sustainable urban development and internal migration. And for us from Kochi, so I've been asked to talk the perspective of Kochi. So Kochi basically is a city of migrants. So I really love this topic because it's not the migration of recent years, and we have hundreds of years of say, like our Jewish population came over here 1,000 years back, and Gujarati, different subsects of Gujarati speaking, Kachi Mamans and Bora community. Likewise, we have 13 different linguistic groups living in Kochi for the last, say, 800 to 1,000 years. And they were all migrants. And that migrants constitute the city. They are the backbone of the city. I don't think that there would be many cities in India that had migrants as its base, or the migrants shaped the future of that city. For instance, like our first, we had Kerala is known for its spices, and we had the first pepper trading center established in the Adenauer by the migrant Jewish community. And I would tell you, like this Lavani dance, it's a form of dance in Maharashtra, in some areas of Maharashtra. It's not there everywhere in Maharashtra now, but it's very much there in Kochi. So it's part of Kochi's culture. So, and that is the beauty of Kochi, and that is the context in which we talk about Kochi and migration and sustainable development. Well, but like, you know, that is like in a historic kind of a context. But then we have seen a lot of migration from Kerala, migration and immigration from Kerala to other parts of India and to South East Asia, like Singapore, Malay, and places like that. Even Sri Lanka, there is this community called Malayalis. They still survive over there, and they don't really speak Malayalam, but then they are known as Malayalis. And then recently to Arabian Gulf, Persian Gulf region. So like, and migration is there in our blood, migration is there in our city. So, and if you really put that in the context of sustainable development, I would certainly say that migration always helped this city. And migration, including the recent migration from various parts of the country, especially from the northeastern states like Assam and Bengal, mainly Bengali-speaking people, and Tamil Nadu and nearby area. It's a historical connection sort of a thing. And why that is happening, like, and what are we doing for making our city like inclusive or safe or a good place for the migrants, and we basically get a lot of benefits from them because they are the major workforce in the city, and they contribute a lot to our exchequer, and they really help our economic progress. For instance, like marine industry, we've been exporting a lot of things to all parts of the world. Marine industry is one of the robust industries of our state, and now a sizable number of workers are from the migrant community, and without them, like once they go on vacation on some particular holidays or some in the northeast and Bengal and wherever, and we face a lot of issues. So they are really part of our economy. And are we really doing sufficient enough as DG11 talk about like sustainability and inclusion? Are we like an inclusive city where we kind of plan? I mean, as Adenauer said, like when you can like make beautiful cities, you can plan beautiful roads, streets, whatever. Until and unless you plan for the poorest of the poor in that city, your planning is never complete. So in Kochi's context, are we really planning for this most vulnerable, especially the recent migrants to the city? I would come to that, but I would certainly say why there is so much of migration, like reverse migration, because we had migration in the earlier historic context to Kochi, from the Jewish population to all others, and then we had migration from Kerala to other places. And now we have reverse migrations, like a lot of people coming to Kerala. It's all because of our human development that's triggering this kind of in migration. As far as our human development index is concerned, we are quite high in so many aspects in the Indian context or Indian standard. So, like we have a very huge aging population. Aging, we can call Kerala as an aging society. And universal education is another thing. And then because of all this, we have shortage of labor. Then we have high wage rates in the state. And then, as I said, like we have our skilled and semi-skilled workers are all migrated to Persian Gulf and countries like that. And then there is this recent construction boom in the state. And finally, like, last in that segment is the climate change induced migration to the state. But like last 2 years, like we have witnessed like climate change so badly that these migrant workers and local population who have been forced to kind of move out of Kochi and places like low-lying areas of Kerala. And the migrant workers are seen, as I said, in almost every sector, from hospitality to seafood to iron and steel industry to garment industry to construction to everywhere. And they are a very strong force. They are a very critical force in the society. But I would admit here in this forum that we haven't done really enough to include them in our, as SDG 11 stipulates, like or like asking our governments, like state government or local government, to kind of plan for them, to really facilitate their or like increase the livability, like make the life better in our society. So like for in that, like I would say, like there is absence of social protection measures like ESI, PF, gratuity, insurance, all that you cannot really see much. And you have large, how do I say, like a lot of exploitation happening, a lot of harassment happening by the employees and contractors, and especially of the recent migrants. And you don't really see them, we don't really give them membership in our welfare funds or schemes and things like that. And we really need to empower them, and we got to include them in their in our social networks. And for that, we really need to give membership in our trade unions. Kerala is very well known in that aspect, like trade unionism. And I would say trade unionism, I would see trade unionism in a positive connotation, a positive note, because everyone has the right to live a decent, or everyone has a right for a decent living. and whoever makes profit will have to share it with their employees. You will have to really pay them. And Kerala, you cannot really get cheap wages. And when you don't get cheap wages, you cannot blame a trade unionism or anything like that. So there is even recently, like there was a lot of negative image spreading about Kerala, saying that it's not business, it's not a trade friendly, economic friendly, commerce friendly, and that's not true. Actually, when the trade progresses, when the economy is benefiting a lot of people, you should also benefit the workers, even the migrant workers. And I think, like, for that, trade unionism very important. And especially the migrants, recent migrants, they are more into the labor, informal labor sector, and no proper contract for them. And we really need to bring in all that. We have to really involve the local governments and the state government, and state government is doing a lot in that sense, because we are not calling them migrant workers, we are calling them guest workers or aditi workers or whatever. And like, these people do not have, this migrant workers, by my labor guest workers do not really have access to legal aid. Actually, like, they are not that powerful. Unless they form trade unions, they cannot really get access to legal support. And it's not, there are not many empowerment programs initiated by local governments or state governments. Yes, Kerala, there are so many, but like that is not reached to the local government level, where like the local governments initiate a lot of programs and projects. And financial inclusion, as far as financial inclusion is concerned, like, they work within an informal network of remittance. Like, how do a lot of people from Bengal and Assam, and we don't really know how they really send their money home, and it's all informal, and they lose a lot of money in that process. And there is no timing for them, and then as I said, like, there is no migrant sensitive credit or insurance that's happening in the state. And as far as this in-migration in Kerala is concerned, then, like, we have a lack of rigorous estimates. We haven't even prepared a proper estimate. We don't really know, because in Kochi, within this 94 to 95 square kilometers area, we have almost 1 million, around 10 lakh migrant workers living. And they are all living in a very bad condition. Government and local governments, we do a lot of periodic checking, but still their contractors, their employers are very smart, and they anticipate this kind of checks and inspections, and they provide certain facilities during that time, but not all the time. So, like, we don't really have proper estimates. And we have a nearby town called Perumbavoor. There, it's a small little town with 50 square kilometers. We have almost 2 million, 20 lakhs migrant workers mainly, and there are 4 theaters, and all of them play Bengali movies now. So it's as interesting as that. And then, like, limitations of registration is there. Like, proper registration is not there. Many of them do not really have documents when they come over here. And then, like, there are a lot of public health challenges that is happening, human rights violations, and challenges as far as social protection is concerned, and perceived surge of crimes. And there are a lot of crimes happening as well. I mean, that's the other side of the whole thing. And as I said, exploitation, discrimination, and you see a lot of rising of resentment from the host community now, especially like this COVID, in the context of pandemic, COVID and all. You have a lot of migrant workers of Kerala origin coming from West Asia, and they are now in kind of collusion with the migrant workers, recent migrant workers. We will have to address all that issues. And like, we really miss the kind of sensitivity in the media as far as migrant workers are concerned. And this media and social media, all of them, like, project it's like crores of rupees from the state is going out of the state, and they say this because of migrant workers, like, there are increasing crimes, and as I said, like, competition for the local workers. And cultural disaster is another thing. Actually, there is an element into it, because Kerala, like, everyone is given proper education, proper food, proper clothes, and at least, like, some proper habit or living conditions. But migrant workers are not in that situation. That will send a lot of negative images to our children, and I think, like, that is an area which we should treat them as equals. We should provide them. That is what, like, the local government should fight. Government should fight. The NGO should fight to give them the decent kind of living that the local population get. We should provide them as well. But for that, we will have to really break this nexus of the contractors and the profit, only profit. What do I say? A profit-making kind of interest of the their employees. And I think, like, I'll just conclude because I have a lot of things to say. But then I'll certainly say certain steps that we are going to take. Like, we are in the process of collecting empirical evidences, and we are doing a lot of consultation, wider consultation on inclusion of migrant workers in our scheme of things, in our planning things. We have a lot of public interest groups working for them, NGOs working for them, trade unions are slowly including them in their group. We are, like, forming a lot of cooperative societies for them, and we have, like, planning and implementing migrant inclusive and sensitive programs within the city. Which in this annual budget, we have included around 8 programs for the migrant workers, including Apnagar and things like that. We have now prepared a document with the support of Reading University on migrant workers and housing, and ICLE is helping us, and GIZ is helping us in implementing that. We are doing a lot of documentation and trying to address their housing needs and education. Education is very important. Like, we are trying to kind of break the language barrier. We are trying to educate their migrant workers with family, with their education of their children, and do a lot of things to mainstream them. Like, as I said, like, the Jewish community who came here 100 years back become Malayali. They are Kochiites, and we want this Bengali, Assami, or Tamil people have already part of us, or Telugu people, because there is a common kind of culture thread in our language and our culture and all. But there is a cultural kind of vacuum or gap between this recent migrant from the northeast and things like that. So we really need to do a lot of mainstreaming programs to include them in our scheme of things, and ultimately we will have to really plan for them, and we will have to include a lot of projects in our budget. As I said, we were included a lot, and our mayor is, like, talking to many of them directly. We are, like, doing periodic inspection, and especially we are looking at the children, and as far as education is concerned, we are providing a lot of educational material. And I would end this small note with saying that in 2018 flood, we have spent a lot of money. We spent a lot of money on the migrant workers because they were all trapped in low-lying areas, and, like, our society really worked to get them back to mainland, and you provide them food and shelter and whatnot. Even during the pandemic time, the local government ensured that we give them enough food. We give them, like, medicine. Whoever want to go back, provide them train tickets and flight tickets, or bus ticket, or arranging bus and things like that. And most importantly, we have provided education for all of them. We are really taking care of their children. May not be very good at taking care of the migrant workers, but certainly we are taking care of their children. We are giving them admission in all schools. We are giving special attention to their education. I'm sure the next generation of migrant workers will be true Kochiite like all of us. And with this, I've missed a lot of points, but certainly I think, like, I've included a lot of points, but I have more and more things to say. But because of paucity of time, I would end my short speech. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot, and for sharing the Kochi's experience on the migration. Maybe we'll come back on the discussion, and maybe we can have you can share other information. We have our next speaker, Dr. Debelina Kundu. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me just share the screen. Is it visible?
Not yet. Yeah, now it's, yes.
I would like to thank you, the chair, as well as ICLEI and KAS for inviting me to this important event of KASpaces on the India seminar on how we are looking at urban development and trying to synchronize with the SDG goals. I will talk very briefly on inclusion or exclusion. I do not know how we are including the migrants in our daily policy space. So I'll take you through a few slides. Unlike the previous speaker who talked about the micro level intervention in the city of Kochi, I'll be speaking basically on at the macro level. And most of us are under a myth that urbanization is urbanization is triggered by massive rural-urban migration, which is actually not the case. If you look at the census data over the decades, what we find is until 2001, rural to rural migration had more than 50% share of the total internal migrants in the country. And since 1981, the share of rural-urban migration to total internal migration remained low and stagnant. And this is basically because our cities are exclusionary to the poor rural migrants. And between the last 2001 and 2011 decades, what we found is that the share of urban to urban migrations has increased. If you look at this column, which I have highlighted in red, we find that rural to urban has more or less remained stagnant, whereas the next column, which I again have highlighted in red, urban to urban component has increased, which means people are moving from small towns to bigger cities instead of coming from rural to urban areas directly. What we also find is the migration, instead of migration, what has triggered urbanization, especially in the last decade, is in situ urbanization, which means rural areas have become urban, and that has added to the scale of urbanization. And if we look at, again, the census data, we find 2,530 new census towns have been added in the last decade. And this has contributed to about 30% of the additional growth. And in the state of Kerala, as for example, when we look at the city growth pattern, we find that each city has depopulated. All the 7 class 1 cities with a population of more than 1 lakh population have depopulated. Whereas if you look at the urban expanse, the greater urban expanse, which we call urban agglomeration, we find there has been massive increase, as a result of which the level of urbanization for the state of Kerala has increased from 25% to around 47.78%, which really means the growth of census towns or the sectoral diversification of the existing rural areas into urban has really contributed to the growth of urbanization in Kerala and also in the country. Same case we find for the state of West Bengal also, and there are other states as well. So when we look at the drivers of urbanization in the country, which are basically 4, we find that natural increase, which was a prominent driver of urban growth in the last few decades, that share has declined. And in the last decade, what we find, as I mentioned, is the net reclassification from rural to urban, rural settlements becoming urban, and also jurisdictional changes that has resulted in urbanization. Again, if we look at what is really coming out from the data, both from the census and the NSSO, we find it is the educated and better off sections of the population who migrate for a longer duration. And among them, we find the share of regular salaried workers is much higher. And there is a decline in the share of casual workers. And large share of workers among the rural urban migrants compared to all migrants and all urban populations, which means that rural urban migration is basically livelihood driven. People come into cities to work. And short duration, when we look at the other stream, which are the short duration migrants, we find they are dominated by the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. And over 50% of the short duration rural urban migrants are in the first to quintile classes, indicating that again, rural urban migration is again poverty driven. Short duration migrants who come to city to work are mainly absorbed in the construction sector. I believe it's around 60%. And the access to basic amenities is low among the short duration migrants as compared to other migrants and all urban population, as has been just a little while ago mentioned by the previous speaker. As we all know, the pandemic has resulted in a large exodus of migrants from large cities, and there has been a humanitarian crisis. We all are aware. And the figures are estimated between, we do not have any exact figure as of now, but it's between 120 to 140 million migrants who were stranded in labor camps or who walked back to the native places and who were without jobs and food security. And Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Rajasthan were the main cities from where people started walking back to their native places. Sorry, these were the places from where people had gone to big cities and they walked back to these native places. And in Mumbai, the figure of stranded migrants was estimated to be 1 million. Again, in this case of Delhi, in this year, we find over more than 5 lakh people left their homes from Delhi during the month of May, June. So what are the key challenges that our cities are currently facing in planning for the migrants? I think this vulnerability which has been brought out during the last 2 years, 2020 and 21, it's not that people were not vulnerable, but it's only the pandemic which really brought into the fore the vulnerability of the poor sections of the population who have migrated to the city for various reasons. And the city governments are facing various challenges in planning for the migrants. Few of them are portability of social security benefits, which really needs to come up. There is lack of comprehensive and collaborative approach between various ministries and various parastatals, the urban local bodies. There is no granular source of data, both at the origin in the villages as well as in destination in the cities. The relief and compensation-based approach is prevalent. There is no holistic approach for the migrants. The data, again, as I mentioned, is outdated, static, and incomplete. There are siloed initiatives, and there is no one-stop information source for the migrants. And one important aspect where the cities are working through the integrated command and control centers, I believe they also need to track the real-time data of migrants, as the last 2011 census was the last conclusive figures of internal migrants. There, again, we did not have any NSSO round on migration post 2007-8, which was the 64th round. And each ministry uses the term migrant in a different manner. There is no standardized definition of migrants across ministries. And the new data has been collected again in silos and captured by multiple independent NGOs offices, but there is no holistic one place source where we could track the data. And again, the schemes and laws remains underutilized, giving misleading number for the migrant population. And one important aspect of migration, which is the circular migration, is not captured in most of the documents. The last few slides, I will just try to showcase a city level initiative which has been taken up by the India Smart City Fellowship Program fellows, is in the city of Surat, where they have tried to help the Surat Municipal Corporation with strengthening the Surat Migration Cell, where already initiatives were taken by the Tata Trust and Ajivika Bureau in organizing the stakeholder integration process. And the proposed functions are several, which are all geared to cater to the migrants. And there are various innovative ways of funding which have been suggested by the fellowship team. And they have also worked on creating a dashboard for the Surat city, which would include the demographic profile of the migrants, their entitlements, about which they are very little aware of, the amenities which they can access, and especially geotag their location with the corresponding offices in Surat, and also skill mapping. So this is an initiative which really needs to be replicated and also strengthened in the city of Surat. And I think if that can happen, I think a lot of the problems may be solved. And what we find is there has been post 2021, during this year and last year, there has been some policy concern directed towards the internal migrants, which was not there previously. One thing is what we find is that registration of migrant workers. I think Delhi government has really started working on registration of migrant workers. Portability of PDS. The government, the Prime Minister did announce One Nation, One Ration card for food security of migrants. Again, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana was expanded to include the affordable rental housing complexes. The Niti Aayog is currently working on drafting of the national migrant labor policy. But these policies really need to come to the ground, be more actionable, and work for the poor migrants. And in conclusion, I would again try to reiterate that bringing migrants at the center of the policy discourse is very important, and there needs to be strict enforcement of the national and state level programs towards the migrants. Another thing which is needed is the enhancement of the coverage of social protection schemes, identification of migrants by local bodies in terms of creating a database, provision of secure, safe and hygienic living condition for the migrants, improvement of squatter settlements where they generally come and live in cities, the temporary quarters in the construction sites where most of the circular migrants live, and mapping these places for better provision of basic amenities, setting up of migrant cells in cities to capture data on migrants, and vigilance at workplaces and registration of enterprises with migrant workers. And finally, to consider the migrants as part of us and not really as they. And this can only be ensured when we really work on giving them the right to the city. I stop here, and I'm ready to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Debalina. I think both you are as a macro level and Dr. Rajan at a city level, at a micro level, given your views and what should be done in both the cities. And I think one point is very clear: migrants should not be excluded; they should be part of the overall system. I think that's the point both of you has made. And now I request our two discussants. Maybe I will ask Professor Dr. Seema first to say what are your views, ma'am, and maybe commenting on these two presentations, and how do we take it forward on the migration. And recently, even during the COVID, it has become a major concern for all the local governments as well as the national government, and also after that maybe Dr. Mukta Naik. Dr. Seema.
Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, of course, for inviting me, and Professor Debulina Kundu and Dr. Rajan for making this session so complete. Like, wherever one was giving a macro view, the other was giving a micro view. And Professor Kundu has, shown us the limelight. Like, what I thought I'm going to speak, I think so everything was just there. But I just found that there were two things which I found which are closer to my heart were missing. Rest all were just there guiding us. But at the initial level, I just want what in the morning also, Sir said that, what is required is the word starting with A called action, action, action. Do we actually have it? I think so that should be embedded in our mind. Wherever we do, let's start with ABC and let's start whether we have an intention like that. If anybody has intention like that, then we need a passion of Dr. Rajan. The way he was speaking, I will say that, the way Dr. Rajan was saying, I think that we need leaders. We all know, the ones who are here, even all of you, when you were designing this particular webinar, you all knew that, what you were wanting. Luckily for each one of us, we have Agenda 2030. Luckily for all of us, this is supposed to be an implementation decade. Luckily for all of us, the ones who are framing this framework, we also had 10 out of 17 sustainable development goals where urban development and migration and urbanization were entwining. But the question is not that, and that means it is right there. You touch, you say knock, knock, knock. They may be having something lined up to do something for it. They may be having something, money also, surplus money lying also, but what they don't have is intention. So we need people like you, the ones who are from diverse backgrounds, the ones who are with passion, the ones who are part of it. Luckily, I always say that this COVID, whenever I look, I'm Seema Parihar. I mean, of course, I don't know whether when I was invited, right now I'm working on Women Empowerment Atlas. Which DST has invited me, and I'm doing that science and technology perspective. I made 2 gender atlases of India for Ministry of Women and Child. So what I found missing out here was gender perspective. Women are just simply missing. Somewhere along the line, why? Because the data says that 90% of the ones who migrate are men. Somewhere along the line, it's in our perception. But this time, what was happening, we saw in this reverse migration, what we saw women with their children in their hand, walking without slippers. They left their livelihood. And I'll say, I can go on and on, but as a role of a discussant, I would not like to do that. But I would definitely like to say that for women in this pandemic, and especially for that migrant women who we so-called middle class and urban class are not allowing them to enter our homes, their livelihood. They were earning so well, they were having their kid in a school with a dream. We have shattered their dreams. Urban system who was always there. We had that small nooker schools. If you remember, all maids also, they came, we want to put our child in an English medium school. That English medium school, we may all say that English medium school, oh my God, it's not modern, it's not that, but still, it was a school where they were learning all those sentences and all that. Where is that particular women? In case if we all look at it, that wife, that women, she has rightly, ma'am, Professor Kundu had rightly said the other, let's not call them they, I'll say let's not call them other, let's not call them this thing. For women, for men also, for that matter, I want to be gender inclusive in this. And of course, loving that tagline, which we all love to repeat, leaving no one behind. Out here, please do not leave women behind. Please do not leave that migrant men behind. You may say that urban to urban or urban to rural migration. My data also says that around 20% or 70%, the ones who are migrated, they are the ones that are going out. And out of that, so many 712 districts, we can say that these are 54 districts, where you have that chunk who just do not know that, what to do. So for me, that missing women, missing data for the women is still a problem. In my atlas, when I made on 188 plus gender desegregated data, I found that all over the world, we do not have data. So that's something which I want to all of you to just remember that whenever we are doing it, it's not only that, but we also do not have a missing data on age structure. Somewhere along the line, we feel that, it is that working population, 18 to 45, we are there. So age is missing, sex is missing, disability is missing, reasons are missing. Of course, we all know in our theory books, we all know that there are some people who migrate, who are forced migration, and some people who want to migrate, for higher education and for higher goals and all that. And we have both type of people who are there. But this time in the so first and foremost, which I think all of us are knowing it, that we need data and it's not there. When I just try to open, because I work with data, as I said, Atlas and all, I work with GIS and remote sensing tools. Then I started looking in my India. Do we have some places like, where we have like, in the international, we have some data available. I just tried to open the United Nations framework where the data was there. I found in the South Asia, out of those 9 countries, we only, in India, it was dash, 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 dash. There was no data that was put there. And our neighbors were the ones like, which had data. And like, on the top was Bangladesh. Bangladesh, the migration and all that. And recently I was nominated for another workshop where I was just doing so Bangladesh. And in addition to Bangladesh, another of our neighbor, Nepal. Nepal also had data on different this thing. They have 6 this thing. So so in our country, what we need, if we have learned people like all of you, the ones who can bring interlinkages, who understand the requirement of holistic management and holistic planning with implementation in mind. And you have people like Professor Kundu and Dr. Rajan and all of you, the ones with passion. Let's go ahead and let's get into that framework. And right now, when I was looking at the portal in the last 3 days, when I just tried to do it, you have 96 variables jotted down. Then I started doing, because I was just counting how many variables there are there. There are 183 variables, which are just down there, but we need to collect them. But another take would be also that, are we actually wanting to collect it? Do we really want that transparency of the data right in the forefront? Do we actually have the intention that data should say this is a bad city, or this is a good city, or this is very nice? I like in the morning when it was just said, it was said that around 4,000 urban, this thing, you have 126 good best practices which are there, which are noted down. Yes, we definitely need to scale up. We definitely need to scale up these. We definitely need to replicate. So first and foremost, what we need to learn, I think so, with all of you here, which we all do not want to learn. It's nice when we are there in big conferences. It's very good when we are there in a 5-star setup. Now these webinars have become our 5-star setups. Is that like, we all love to give great red, blue, green GIS interoperable maps. But as one of you rightly said, even today, we talk of interoperability, we talk of data science, we talk of everything good, social engineering. We have such nice vocabulary. We talk of all the, but do we have a definition of a migrant person? We do not have it. Do we have a definition? Still, we are confused. And I go to the women again, even the migrant, we go to the women again in that migrant, whether you're a woman, whether you are a girl, or whether you are this thing, we want to have an interoperability there. We cannot have it. What sharing are we talking about? Another thing which I'll say that policy framework, yes, we have announced a lovely policy. I'm a die-hard Indian, a patriotic Indian. We have announced very nice policies. Government announced on June 2020 that 50,000 crore scheme for Garib Kalyan, Rozgar Abhiyan and all that. And we've got a list of those 7 policies, which I was just jotting down. But yes, money is going so that pathways are made. But how much sustainable those pathways are, or they are again sporadic pathways, which will give me a question mark when I'll just ask them, when I'll knock after 1 year. So that's another thing which I want. That's something which is so very important, which is there. But the third and foremost thing is that, what I feel we need, as when Dr. Rajan was saying, and even for that matter, Professor Kundu also was talking about, they were talking about that they were recognizing that there are people without jobs. They were recognizing there are people, who are poor people. They were recognizing that poverty is there. And foremost, both of them recognized that we need education. Education is required. And of course, I'll just add a prefix to it, which we all know it. We are not adding skilled education. Are we ever thinking of having small mini school of Xylo? Sometimes, it's very nice to have top-down approach. Sometimes it's very nice to have bottom-up approach. But wherever what fits in, first of all, what we need is, we definitely need all this to be there. And of course, in methodological tool, you all said I'm closer to map. So I say we need to map. And we also today, I was just looking at 2 beautiful projects, but do we have them in India? I just thought that let me just, so we have a digital globe project where they're using high resolution satellite imageries, where they're mapping and, they're just knowing it. So once we had all that, I just thought in case if we have it in Somalia, we have it there. Yes, agree, we are very lucky. We do not have not at that scale, but some scale, of course. India is such a billion population. We have everything here, some scale, minor scale, mixed scale, and that scale. But so we need to map. We need to map whatever is happening, and we need to put them in a dashboard. It can be done by you. You can have people from academia, you can have people from industry, you can have people from government. And I think so the way you all are, you all can get everybody together. But we all have a problem. Sometimes it happens. There's another thing which I end up in as I'm just discussing. We also have one problem, and that problem is that we actually in our hearts of hearts, we do not want to have a responsibility. If you give a tag to number of people to work on that integrated goal, then again, there is a possible. So you need also to have a mechanism. On mechanism, how sharing happens, how policy framework is designed, and how the people with right intention should this thing. And please include with women, little children also, whose education is just not happening. Digital learning environment was just not there. At least COVID 20 years back when I went for my postdoc in Netherlands, I was working on some web GIS, this thing, it was not there. Today, it's just there. Make use of these opportunities. Today, everybody is having so-called lovely phone. Everybody means a lot of them. I mean, I'm speaking relatively post-COVID. So the ones who are having, please include them. Crowdsourcing is a real thing of data collecting. Machine learning is there. Make small groups and have them all together and scale up the activities. And I just hope, I just wish all those lovely points that at macro scale Professor Kundu wrote in last 3 slides, and the passion of Dr. Rajan, when he also went to an extent and he's justified trade unions, and he was justifying that how local bodies, so that means basically what you need to do is finish. What you need to do is go near them, include their language, and just go ahead and do them. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot. I think your last point, your mic is muted. If you want to repeat your last point, ma'am.
No, I just want to say that please hug migrants. Please hug each of them, and really have an intention, and especially to you, Mr. Imani, I just want to see, please make these webinars and these carrying capacity programs, or article fashionable. Nowadays, we do not use carrying capacity, we use other lovely words. Use them, whatever, but please reach those people and hold them and leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot for the lively discussion. Mukta, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Imani. No, I'll keep my comments brief and respond. I think Dr. Rajan, Professor Kundu, Dr. Parihar have said a lot. I actually, when I was thinking about this, was looking at the SDG 11 and how it is broken up. And I was thinking that without internal migration, if we look at local governments, urban local governments in India, if we don't use an internal migration lens, I would go as far as to say that it is not possible to achieve most of those SDG 11, sub objectives, whether it's of housing, transport, inclusive urbanization for sure, whether it's effective natural disasters, as Dr. Rajan mentioned, if you leave migrants behind, you can't respond to a natural disaster either, and environmental impacts of cities if you don't extend solid waste management to areas where migrants live. I mean, these are very obvious things. I'm just stating it because I think we sometimes have conversations about SDG 11 and conversations about internal migration in two different forums and different silos. So I really appreciate this thought to bring these two conversations together. As an urban planner, trained as an urban planner, but trying to work exclusively in the area of migration, I often struggle because migration is a very complex, widespread phenomenon. It's a regional phenomenon. As Debalina ma'am said, it's not just a rural-urban migration thing. There's so many different things happening. So as a migration scholar, you can't say, I'm only going to think about cities. You have to see them as interlinked. And in that context, I think I've started thinking of migration as actually an act of resilience. And I'd like to, in that context, bring the data point around to what are the ignored forms of mobility that are not represented in any form of data right now, and link it directly to the kind of exclusions that happened during COVID-19. We all know this, but I think we need to state it up front. I think Dr. Seema has already mentioned the invisibility of women and children in data sets, not just in migration data, but in work data. Or any other form of data also directly leads to exclusion, because if they are not counted, you cannot deliver services to them. It's just as simple as that. If they're not enumerated, they don't exist. The other is, of course, seasonal migrants, which have really been a pain point for us. How do we count them? Where do we count them? Do we count them at source? Do we count them at destination? The frequency of mobility could be multiple times a year. It could be once, a 7-8 month a cycle of moving to a work site. That work site may not be in a municipal area. It may be in a peri-urban area, which is actually classified as rural, but exists to feed the urban economy because it's a construction site or it's a brick kiln site. So these are linkages that exist. We know it, but how do we bring them back into our systems of measurement is something that we really need to think about. The other thing I wanted to draw attention was commuting. Already we know it's a huge issue within metropolitan regions. And with the expansion of infrastructure corridors, I did a lot of my field work in a city called Kishangarh in Rajasthan, which is a marble processing hub. And most of the workforce in those marble processing units come on motorcycles and on, shared vehicles of various kinds. And there is no low carbon mobility lens there. So there we have, two very intrinsic parts of the SDG 11 agenda, which do not see connection with each other, because Kishangarh Municipal Corporation is simply not in a position to think about this. The entire, and it's an interesting case study, because the RICO development, the industrial development is happening on RICO lands. RICO is a parastate. I mean, it's a state government organization, but the land is very much within the Kishangarh Municipal Corporation boundary. So the lens comes directly on that institutional relationship between RICO, which reports to Jaipur, Kishangarh Municipal Corporation, which is a Nagar Panchayat. It's not a municipal corporation, it's a Nagar Panchayat. So there are certain circumscribed abilities and capacities that it needs to work with. So these are I think this is exactly at city level. I really think localizing SDGs in this sense with an internal migration perspective, not looking at internal migrants in very caricatured way, that it's a rural migrant coming to urban. It's only a construction worker because we have the BOCW and that's a mechanism, so we're going to just look at construction workers. No, I mean, it has to have a place-based lens. That's my second submission. We have to have a place-based lens to look at internal migration. I think frequent localized systems to estimate migrants in cities not being there was the biggest reason for the migrant crisis last year. No city could really say not just how many migrants were there, but where in the city do they live. We all know it anecdotally. Like Dr. Rajan said, everyone knows that Perumbavoor is a migration hotspot. But Perumbavoor could not say how many, where exactly, and they could, if they could, it was through coordination with CSOs, with civil society, and with local, even more localized and embedded forms of governance, where Kerala stood out in its response. So where is that other embedded civil society and interface between urban governance and that sort of very embedded presence on the field in other cities? Can the Integrated Command and Control Center play a role there? Is the data from the ability of the ICCC going to interface with that messiness on the ground of the 15 different NGOs who know different parts of the city intimately, but may have different political leanings? Who is going to take that decision to suspend, especially in times of disaster, but even otherwise? Because for a migrant, every day is disaster. Anybody who's done field work during the last 1.5 years would tell you that migrants said, yes, COVID-19 was awful, but we live this disaster on a cyclical basis every year. So we don't know why you're making such a fuss about COVID-19. And I'm talking from my fieldwork experience. So we have to see it in that sense. in that lens that especially for a seasonal migrant who's moving back and forth constantly, navigating different kind of jurisdictions in that informal space, looking at footholds into employment, into housing, into services, all through informalized channels. What is the role of the city? And here we come to that big elephant in the room, the formal versus informal element. What part of this can be formalized? What part of it will have to, for some perceivable period of time, be left to the political economy? What elements of the political economy can be brought into conversation with each other? Dr. Rajan mentioned trade unions, in order to come to those slightly better incremental solutions, and then over a period of time you move with participation to better solutions. A simple example, Debulina ma'am talked about Surat. We just recently finished a study with UNICEF focusing on social protection and women and children migrants. And a simple thing like in Surat, there's very efficient birth registration and very high amount of institutional delivery. Just that. And that's not something that they're doing for migrants. They're doing it for everybody. But to be able to do that and make sure that somebody who's working on site and delivering, as a construction worker in the city for 8 months of the year, but is delivering in Surat, and therefore is, the child is registered in the birth data, automatically makes it easier for Surat then to track them in terms of whether it's the migration card that's used for school education, or whether it's the migration card that's used for the maternity benefits program, and they're moving back and forth. So it's just extremely simple, I think, starting points for registration. Where does the migrant interface with the government system at local level? And can the municipal corporation, the local body, in conjunction with the state, work to strengthen some of these key points, which will automatically then, I think, set off a chain reaction and improve this. And I think there again, thinking in silos in terms of saying, let's only think about BOCW, let's only think about is problematic. And also the interface between unorganized workers and migrant workers is a blurred interface, because not all migrant workers are unorganized workers and not all unorganized workers are migrant workers. So migration as an additional data point to whatever else is being talked about in the city is very useful. Not just are you or are you not a migrant, but also what kind of migration do you indulge in is something that the local government would need to know. Coming back to planning and the sort of provisions of, the planning provisions, it is not possible to do a good urban plan of any kind on faulty data estimates. If I don't know how many people live in my city, how they move in and out of the city, I can't do anything. I can't do any form of inclusion, housing planning. I mean, you may have the best ARHC scheme in place. You may have, the best intention in terms of 24/7 water supply, but I don't know who's living where and in what frequency and what kind of living arrangements they have in the city. So just a last nod to Professor Seema's point on, do we want to know? Do we really, really want to know? And it is really, I think, a point of introspection. And I think we can start with cities like Kochi, which have acknowledged very clearly that migrant workers are an important economic constituent, but also have a language of integration, mainstreaming, which I really appreciated. These particular two words of integration and mainstreaming, which are used very, very commonly in the European context, but have only, I think, now in light of the migrant crisis been used in a more mainstream way here. So I think we should work with that and say, okay, we understand that a full citizenship may not be immediately possible in one go, but if we have a long-term mainstreaming agenda, then what are the starting points where the barriers are the lowest and we can achieve it? And then how do we then do a step-by-step integration such that migrants can pick benefits, can avail government services that they are entitled to, regardless of where they are at whatever point of time. This obviously requires a lot of data flexibility and a very strong data backbone, which is what the One Nation, One Ration card is relying on to take this forward. But as we all know, while the digital backbone is still being built, the on-ground issues of the political economy persist. So I may have a perfectly good backbone, but unless I go out and talk to that fair price shop owner, unless I go and talk to the local community and say, listen, if 5 more people from your tenement are going to take PDS from this fair price shop, you should be okay with it because the government's made provision for that supply. You don't need to be insecure about it. Who's going to make that communication? Who's going to say those words? And that's again where the local government and the city comes into play. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mukta, for questioning the system, but also offering some of the best practices. And I just want to say I'm very sorry I could not continue this discussion. Very good discussion we could have, but we are already 29 minutes late. Next session speakers, they have some other engagements also. Maybe we'll pick it up these points in the last discussion, last session in the discussion. If you all have time, please stay back. We will pick it up after the third technical session. We also have half an hour time there for discussions on that. So thank you, Dr. Rajan. Thank you, Dr. Debelina, Dr. Seema ma'am, and Mukta ji. And I will just hand it over to the next session, which will be chaired by my colleague, Ms. Soumya. And Soumya, the floor is yours, and I request other speakers to please join us. Thanks again. Very rich and interesting discussion, but unfortunately, I'm sorry, we don't have much space to have further discussion. Thank you again, Soumya, if you can take over.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar, and big thank you to all the panelists. Yeah, I'm just looking at the clock, and I know we are running significantly late. So just very briefly on this session, we are going to be discussing urban climate resilience, looking at what is happening in the urban space, where are the good practices, what are the challenges, how are the state governments helping urban spaces in tackling climate challenges and improving climate resilience. So these are a few topics and aspects that we would discuss in the upcoming session. Without, yeah, we had a few slides, I think, on an introduction to urban climate resilience, but I'm going to skip that. We all know that India is facing challenges from changing climate, be it in terms of extreme heat or droughts or rainfall, heat waves. But we also know that cities have now become cognizant of this fact, are taking significant action, spurred on by the national government, but also of their own initiatives. And cities are developing climate action plans, coming up with their emissions inventories, looking at climate vulnerability assessments, and coming up with short-term, medium-term plans with actual targets for GHG emission reductions. So all of this is happening, but this is not happening enough. And there are challenges to this, but there are forerunner cities as well. So we'll hear from our panelists today. We have two esteemed panelists with us. We have Mr. Shwetal Shah, who's the technical advisor with the Climate Change Department in Gujarat. And then we have Mr. Kamlesh Yagnik, who's the Chief Resilience Officer from Surat Municipal Corporation. We've heard a lot about Surat today. We'll hear more from Mr. Yagnik. And then we have with us Professor Dr. Charlene Singhal, who kindly agreed along with Ms. Nivedita Mani to be the discussants and respond to what Mr. Yagnik and Mr. Shah is saying. Mr. Shwetal Shah, if I could ask you to start with your introductory remarks, and I request both of you, both the speakers, to kindly keep your remarks short to maybe about 5 minutes. I then would give enough time for the ensuing discussion. So over to you, Mr. Shwetal Shah.
Thank you, Soumya ji, and thank you, ICLEI and KASpaces for organizing this webinar. And very good remarks and comments we have heard from the experts in first two sessions. So this session is about climate resilience in urban areas, and we know that urbanization is one of the important challenge in this time, and it is going to grow in next decade or so. So it is very important for all of us to focus on urban sustainability. And since I am working with the Climate Change Department of Government of Gujarat, we are trying to find out the ways and means to explore opportunities for climate change adaptation and mitigation in the cities. And we have many cities in Gujarat. We have 4 very large cities and 8 municipal corporations, and beyond that we have urban local bodies of around 160 numbers. So all these urban spaces are very important culturally as well as historically. And now with the development going on, we also require to manage so many things in urban cities. And since migration is happening from smaller villages and smaller towns to big cities, the population is constantly growing in big cities like Ahmedabad, Vadodara, Surat, Rajkot. So we require to make arrangement for basic public facilities like water supply, storm water drainage, sewage, like liquid waste management and solid waste management. Then we also require to check on the green cover, the road planning and traffic management is also very important, because the cities are growing beyond its carrying capacity in terms of vehicles on road. Then we also have the issues of slum and health issues in particularly such communities. Then we also require to have a robust public transport system. So we are all working for public transport and now electric mobility. Then already we also have some old waste that is already dumped into dump sites. So we require to remove that waste and also look at the current waste management so that it do not turn into a garbage pile. So these are the issues. So among all these issues, if we look at the recent climate smart cities assessment framework 2.0, then we got the first rank among all 128 odd cities in entire country, and Surat was the ranked first in this assessment. So do we satisfy with the first rank of Surat, or do we continue to improve more? So this is the thing. So definitely the answer is no. We do not require to satisfy, but we require to scale up. As earlier speakers have already told that we have to customize the best practices and learning from other cities, and we have to implement those best practice in our cities, and then scale up the this best practices. So in Gujarat, we have tried many policy level initiatives, and as many of you might be aware that Gujarat is #1 in solar rooftop system installations on residential buildings. We are also leading in overall renewable energy in our energy basket, and we are also now going aggressively in electric mobility, and we have now EV policy for the state, and we have many other policies and programs for various aspects. And state government is also supporting various initiatives in the local government area, and our big cities are very much empowered with the finance and other technical and other commercial aspects. But we also require similar strength among our smaller cities, so that they can also build their own climate resilience plan and heat action plan, and other adaptation centric plans are also going well in our big cities. But now we require to take all these learnings from big cities to smaller towns, and also implement very robustly even in our big cities, because they have diversity of people and communities within the city. and their vulnerability is also different because big rivers are also passing through our cities, like Sabarmati River from Ahmedabad and Tapi River in Surat. So we have also issues related to flood management and water quality issues in these rivers, and we have also Vishwamitri River in Vadodara city. So micro planning and program with holistic approach is required in all these areas, and a state government with help of various national and international organization, and with uh, a grassroots level help from the city governments. We are trying to make our city more resilient, and Surat and Ahmedabad and Rajkot particularly have given some very good cases and very good progress in this direction in last decade, and we require to continue this further. And Kamlesh Bhai is already here, so he'll speak. And one of the best thing they have done in Surat was establishing Surat Climate Trust. So these are some of the very novel thing that we have been able to do in Gujarat that we require to strengthen. So such institutions are required to strengthen, as already told in the morning by Shri Hitesh Vaidyaji, and really equally with their ongoing projects in three of our cities are also working in a similar direction. And I hope that this capacities phase 2 project with the help of ICLEI will also give us good chance to develop a city level action plan for climate change in coming time. And whatever good things that we have done already, there are several case studies that already having with us in Gujarat that we require to strengthen and scale up further. So I think I'll limit my comments here, and then we can have further discussion at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Shwetal Bhai. I think that was a very succinct discussion and information on what the Gujarat government is doing. Of course, we all know that it is one of the forerunner governments which is enabling climate action at the urban level through policies and through handholding and financial support also to the local authorities on several of these aspects. But I think the proof we will hear from the experience of Surat. And so I would request Mr. Kamlesh Yagnik, who's been the face of urban resilience in Surat for so many years now, and it's a pleasure to have him here. So the floor is yours. So you're muted.
Okay. Thank you, Soumya. It's been nice listening to story of Surat since morning. It started with Professor Kundu, then Mukta, and then Shwetal Bhai. So I am, like positioned perfectly to share about, what's happening in city of Surat. Now, before, I talk about city of Surat, World Economic Forum in 2020, in their global risk report, they mention, in the first 10 risk which, human beings are going to face for next 10 years, two of the things, which they mention, one was spread of infectious disease, and the second one is a climate change. And COVID-19 has exposed, like how vulnerable we are as a system. And especially, like in emergency response, in governance, in early warning, disease forecasting, and public care. Now, climate change is no different than COVID-19. The corollary is so similar that what is true for COVID-19, it is true for climate change. Now, Surat, as Shwetalbhai mentioned that, yeah, we've been doing good, on a national scenario, especially in in smart cities contest, and currently in this climate smart cities assessment framework. For last 3 years, we've been, on position 1. So what exactly, are we doing in Surat? I want to share in very briefly. Now, first and foremost, Surat did whatever it could do on mainly on 4 counts. Number one is the industrial peace. Secondly is the political stability. Thirdly is community participation, and fourthly are changeable, fast changing policies, because the local government policies are very dynamic in nature. So they respond, very fastly, as what are the based on the needs of the society. Now, Surat, for last 10 years, as Soumya mentioned, we've been working. And now, today, I'm very happy that ICLEI has given us, this particular subject of climate and urban resilience, putting both the things together. We independently work in climate change resilience, when Surat was included in Asian Climate Change Resilience Series Network. We started with that, and we thought, okay, climate is not something which can be dealt in isolations. It has to be dealt in integrations. And over a period, what we did, the climate was integrated, not only not only concentrating on defined parameters like precipitation, heat, the temperature variance, and seawater rise, but we also dealt in various issues like water management, mobility, affordable housing, environment management, health, economic resilience, and social resilience. So all these 7 parameters, at a local level, although it's not a mandatory function of any municipal corporations, but Surat municipal corporations very proactively worked in all these areas together to resolve, multiple problems, because resilience is, like resolving multiple problems with a single stone. And that's what, we did it in Surat. And some of the notable projects, which we did it in Surat. Number one is we are right now, coming out with a water plaza. That's a, a water resilience. It is going to give us. There is a air quality monitoring, project is in place currently. Now Surat is actively participating in currently the focus is on bicycles. Now Surat, we make close to about 10 million trips a day. That's traveling from point A to point B. Now, out of them, 50% of the trips, they are less than 3 kilometers. Now, if, and all of them, this, trips I'm talking about, which are made on petrol or diesel. So now Surat is concentrating that if we cut down this trip by 50%, imagine the kind of savings, we'll have in terms of petrol. And for that, we are working together. That, all people, various, not only academia, not only administrations, but people at large, industry. So there is a change. So, like now, we are waiting for the tipping moment, that tipping point, like very soon we are expecting, like would come. And you will see a city turning into a city of bicycles. We do have infrastructure, but currently that infrastructure is not sufficient to carry it out. So that's something, like which we are very much doing it. And then another initiative, it's a very, again, an innovative thing, I would say, is, like our sewage treatment plant, it's become a gold mine now. Now, like at local level, what we are doing is, at each STP, we are analyzing sewage, for its various epidemic. So that will, help us, okay, which community, which area there's an outbreak of epidemic. So that's, a great initiative, which we have done it, in Surat city. And another event, another project which I must mention is emission trading system. For the first time, with the support of government of Gujarat, we could actually implement it emission trading system. It is the first of its kind in the world, wherein, currently, about 140, because as we know, Surat is a city of textiles, so and chemicals. So these chemical units and textile units, they have come forward and they say that, okay, let's join together. So just like we have a carbon trading, we do have a emission trading, and that's really, like it's almost now 1.5 years it is in place, but it is definitely generating beautiful results. And another thing, which we are planning is we are re-engineering the water transmission lines, because the energy consumption, in transmitting, 1 billion liter of water every day, it requires, like tremendous amount of energy. So that is what, we are re-engineering it, keeping a target of non-revenue water at 15%. So it's a very big challenge, and Surat, like is currently working on it. And one more thing, which I want to share in Surat. Recently, we generated our climate action plan, which was based on, one European framework. Based on that, an inventory of the city was calculated, the GHG inventory, which was followed by risk and vulnerability assessment, and then appropriately targets. Like we took, all the people together. Well, yeah, various groups were formed, various focus discussions were carried out, and then targets are arrived at. Now, based on these targets, a city climate action plan is kept ready. Now, this particular plan is adopted by Surat Municipal Corporation. So people's aspirations are reflected in this plan, and then, this plan will be formally adopted by municipal corporation. So, municipal corporations can act accordingly. Now, we do not have a monitoring mechanism to see whether this particular plan gets appropriately implemented or not. But, we are in a process of formalizing it, how actually we'll monitor how actions are being implemented. So this is, like in nutshell. And what we are planning to do, we did one experiment with the climate change department in Gujarat, wherein, we formed a covenant of mayors of Gujarat, wherein 8 city mayors, the first top 8 cities of the city, they are going to be in one covenant, in one group. So it's very, very important that, the shared learning takes place. And with the, climate change department as a focal point, all the cities, will have they will showcase their best practices and their challenges and learn from each other, because then replication will be much faster, because, we are in the same geographic area and we are, run by the same governance. So it will produce, much better results. So this is what, like in nutshell, I wanted to share about Surat. And thank you very much, Eakly, for giving us a chance to showcase what Surat is doing. Thank you, Soumya.
Thank you, Kamleshji. Thank you very much. I think very excellent initiatives from the city of Surat, and we've been hearing this over a period. But also interesting to hear is that you see need for improvement, and that is something that you're looking to re-engineer, and new initiatives coming up all the time. And yeah, we are happy to showcase this through the various platforms that we have. And congratulations to Surat on the climate action plan. I think that is all your concerted effort over the years, it has fructified, and that gives a vision to the city. One of our in the inaugural session, we had heard from the senior official from the health ministry on the MRV systems, and that is what you're speaking about as well, is not enough to have the action plans, but what do we do on the monitoring, reporting, on the verification, on the impacts of what is being planned and done. And yeah, I think these are a few points that we would need to deliberate on and improve in the systems that we have in our cities. Ms. Nivedita, if I may ask you to give your impression of and your thoughts on what you've heard so far, and what is your own organization, the Gorakhpur Environmental Action Group, doing to foster climate resilience in the country and in the region. So over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Soumya ji. And it is really heartening to hear once again the Surat experience, because at some point this journey was together started when the Asian Cities for Climate Change Resilience Network program was launched in India. And Surat, wherein Kamlesh was leading the initiatives. Similarly, we were doing it for the city of Gorakhpur, which was also a partner city in the whole program. And thereon we went to scale it up to several other Eastern Indian cities in Assam and West Bengal and Bihar as well. So it's always a very learning experience to hear out experiences of Surat, and somewhere we also feel jealous of the city of Surat, that many things that the Surat model has showcased and sort of gave us a lot of learning, we have not been able to do it for several governance related challenges in our part of the region. But anyway, nevertheless, there is a lot that has been done, and we should be celebrating that and also learning lessons from other cities like Surat. So very quickly, because I know that there is a paucity of time, I would like to rather reflect on our experiences that we've been doing in the region, in the North and the Eastern Indian region. So one of the key things that I'm sure Kamlesh ji and Mr. Shah will also agree is that when we talk about urban resilience and cities, we cannot see cities in silos unless and until we see the whole urban and the peri-urban connect with it, and also the rural connects in somewhere down the line. So immediately talking about the urban peri-urban connect, which is very, very important for ecosystems conservation and which also lends resilience to the cities, is very important. And GAG had worked a lot on these issues in the city of Gorakhpur and other cities in Bihar, West Bengal, and Assam. What we've seen is that there is a total development divide between the urban and peri-urban areas that exist today, and because of which there is a lack of clear conceptions, and the concrete policies are lacking for peri-urban areas, especially which are like on cities fringes basically, and they provide a lot of resilience to the cities, not only in terms of climate resilience, but also in terms of livelihood resilience, in terms of food resilience, I would say, and all of that. So, and when we talk about the climate resilience specifically for cities which are flood affected, in the flood affected regions like ours, these ecosystems which lie, in the peri-urban areas, be it the water bodies, be it the green open areas, be it the orchards, be it the blue-green infrastructure, they provide the much needed buffering capacity to the cities. And increasingly what is happening is that because of the unclear policies, because of the development divide, these peri-urban areas are not taken into consideration when we do resilience planning for cities. So there lies the gap, because of which the urban resilience is also impacted. So GAG went on to do a lot of activities for ecosystem restoration, for strengthening the nature-based solutions that these ecosystems provide in the peri-urban and even in the urban areas, and lend resilience to the cities. Just if I give a very quick figure, sort of to set up the whole context, is that, for instance, if I take the example of Gorakhpur city, 82% of the natural water bodies are completely encroached today. A few years back, there were 103 water bodies in the city, and now we have remained with only 16 or 18, and that too in a very pathetic situation. If we see about the whole agricultural area around the city, more than 7% of the agriculture area is converted into residential area. So this increasing concretization of the cities, which is happening mostly in the fringes, because now in the main city, there are spaces already constrained. This is actually leading to a lot of problems related to waterlogging, related to flooding, and so on. Because of this, so this is one very important aspect of urban climate change resilience when we look into that aspect. The second that we have also understood at the local level is that a good development in itself is a resilient development in cities. But somehow that's not happening because of the lack of capacities, one would say, or for any financial allocation reasons. That, for instance, if a drain has to be constructed, and if it is not constructed according to the local gradient system, then that leads to waterlogging. That leads to overspilling of the sewage water or the storm water. So these kind of things are already impacting sort of, I would say, the mal-developmental practices are also hindering the whole resilience agenda in cities, is what we have learned and understood. The third, the point I would like to highlight here is that we have what has been our experience of working in the secondary cities is that we have the National Action Plan on Climate Change, which lays out the policies and the whole what needs to be done for building resilience. Then we have the state action plans for climate change. But when we come at the sub-national level, at the district level or at the city level, there are hardly any government orders or actionable points for the city stakeholders that how they should implement this state action plan on climate change at the city level or at the sub-district city level. So there lies the main problem for us when we operate at the city level, at the local level, because the stakeholders, the municipal bodies or the urban local bodies aren't much aware of these issues. And then they do not have the guidelines, they do not have a roadmap how to implement these things at the local level. And the last thing that I would like to highlight in the paucity of time is our experience has been that if we want to get the whole resilience agenda implemented on the ground, this needs tremendous capacity building. Tremendous capacity building, I would say, at all levels, at the city level, at the district level, at the, and not only one sort of one size fits all, like we design a capacity building training program and then we sort of deliver the training program and it is done. No, see, if the ward corporator is involved in the resilience action planning at the ward level, he needs to be trained differently. At the city level, the officials need to be trained differently. So we need to customize also this whole capacity building processes and agenda so that the whole resilience agenda trickles down from top to bottom and then the actions on the ground start happening. I think with this, I will stop here because the time is also less. And if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you, Nivedita, for this. I think very important points, especially on the urban peri-urban linkage and how do you devolve the vision and the plan at the state level down to the cities is something that is key. We have heard from Mr. Hitesh Vaidya this morning that collaboration, cooperation, and partnerships are key to ensuring that there is this trickle down of policy to the local level and implementation at the local level itself. I think Mr. Shwetal Shah would be able to speak to that a little bit in terms of what the climate change department is doing to enable action at the local level. So being at the state level and guiding climate action in the city, in the state of Gujarat. So would you have some thoughts on that, Mr. Shah?
Yes, definitely. Actually, we have also, like in our policies and programs, giving say targets and goals to even the districts and cities. Like in solar rooftop, when the scheme started, we highlighted that how much potential we have in different cities, and accordingly the resources were mobilized. Similarly, in public transport, we have identified 8 municipal corporation cities and 22 Class A municipalities under the Chief Minister Urban Bus Scheme. So a number of buses and amount of subsidy are also earmarked for each of the city based on the requirement and based on the population. So similarly, in every scheme and every program, if it is like houses for this urban middle class and lower middle class and the poor people. So the things are planned in a way so that every city has the idea that what they require to do in the coming time. Similarly, for the sustainable development goals, we have also prepared the roadmap for the state. And even in this roadmap, we have included all 17 goals and what is required, say, for every goal in every district. So we have similarly now in vulnerability assessment also we are going at the district level, so that we can identify which district has what type of priority and what type of problem. because we have 1600-kilometer long coastline, and there are several districts on the coastal belt. So they require, say, different priorities. Then those districts which are say in middle of the state or landlocked districts, which may have different priority, like water scarcity is one of the major issue in North Gujarat and Kutch area. Also, our eastern districts are having more tribal population. So we have One Bandhu Kalyan Yojana, particularly for the tribal districts. So accordingly, we are now say doing the micro planning, and also now we are going up to the mandal block level, taluka level, so that we can map the results, and we can also focus on the priority areas in which those districts or talukas are lagging, so that we can give focus to those areas. Also, Government of India has started the scheme of aspirational districts. So aspirational districts require more social and other financial support for upbringing their parameters of various importance, maybe in education, health, or in other social indicators. So this way, the things are moving from the say the central level and the state level to the district level and the grassroots level, and also within the city. Now they are moving up to the ward level, so that every ward has different say key areas, uh, so that they can manage their resources and problems in very effective and result oriented way.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for giving us the detail on that. I think from the state to the district to the cities and down to the ward level, the way the policies are being devolved and the way implementation is being handheld at the state level, I think that augurs well for overall climate action and the climate action vision that the state government of Gujarat has. Mr. Kamlesh Yagnik, I think there's a question for you on whether Surat City has come up with their SDG report. Any thoughts on that? So you're muted.
No, I mean, there is obviously there is no explicit report on SDG actions, in city of Surat. But yeah, there are, like some groups independently, although they are working, but, like a corporation, but, like it gives us an idea now to take this up, and we'll see to that. Rather, I take this as a suggestion where, we can initiate this action, and we can ask Surat Municipal Corporation to take this up. That's true. Yeah.
Sure, Mr. Yagnik. Yeah, that was a question from Mr. Mangesh Dige from the Pune Municipal Corporation. Mr. Dige, do you have any insights on this? Anything that you would like to share that the Pune Municipal Corporation has done?
Well, not really, but we have been also trying to do some SDG reporting for Pune City. But as of now, it is more or less remaining into the environment status report, which we publish every year. So we try to align the various development works of Pune Municipal Corporation towards the SDG goals and the sub goals. So that is one of a small effort from Municipal Corporation to see how the city is aligned towards SDG goals. Yeah, these are what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Dige. I think, yeah, there are, Pune is another of those cities which has taken excellent action, both on environmental sustainability, but also on climate change, and is one of the forerunner cities in the country. Yeah, I think without, are there any other questions from the audience? If yes, I would request you to kindly raise your hand or type in the question in the chat box. Okay, I don't see any right now. So we will come back if there are any questions after the next session. I would like to thank the panelists and the discussants of this particular session. Thank you, Kamlesh Agneji. Thank you, Swaital Bhai, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I know Ms. Nivedita had to leave. We had another discussant who was to join us from the Terry University, Dr. Shalin Singhal, but I don't see him. He had to leave for another inaugural ceremony. So
I am here now, Soumya.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't see it.
But do we have time or should?
Yeah, if you could just give your insights on what you have heard, I think in 5 minutes, and then we can move on to the next section, if that's okay.
Okay, I could not attend this session because there was another MOU signing. If you allow me, there is a brief presentation that I can share with the participants.
Sure, sir. If we can do that in 5 minutes, that would
yes,
be okay.
we'll try. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir, we can. Yeah.
Just very quickly, I'm mentioning it. What is since I come from the university environment, what is the role that higher education and research can play in this area of sustainable solutions for urban development? Based on what I've heard from the morning, there is a lot of optimism that we can hear, we can see that, and particularly in terms of our ongoing efforts towards planning, strategies, and actions. We have understood the multidimensional resilience comprehension towards climate change, wherein cities are acting as hotspots. And there is certainly efforts towards the multi-level capacity strengthening, whether it is at the national level, regional Asia-Pacific level, or at our urban local bodies. There are certain questions that I would put forward for this and the rest of the sessions. What had been our trajectory on the discourse of urban sustainability and resilience? What can be the optimal route for this transition to resilience? And what is our role as higher education institutions and research organizations? So certainly, if you look at the discourse moving from the triple bottom line of economy, society, and environment towards identifying culture as the most important and the fourth pillar of society, which becomes therefore our comprehension of resilience at the urban level. If we look at the context, we have moved from reducing environmental impact towards radical rethinking and redesigning of minimizing these impacts. We have moved on, and we are moving on from growth in, let's say, the early 20th century to degrowth, and now greener growth, which is emphasizing on resource efficiency, and also particularly advocates from transition to transformation and eco-innovation. It is also heartening to understand that around 65% of world's GDP will be coming from 600 cities, and this is going to happen in the next 5 years or so, one of the recent publications. But our immediate context, which is post-COVID, we already noticed that many cities do demonstrate the ingredients for resilience. However, a concern or the caution is that inequalities in cities are likely to continue. Particularly, we have seen this in India as well. Therefore, the cities do not have to return to their business as usual models of growth and consumption of resources. We certainly do need to reimagine our cities going beyond 2040. And if we look at even in early 70s, these were the challenges which is even standing in front of us as we comprehend urban resilience. They are the same challenges that we see. We also notice that even the urgency of green recovery, which was prioritized in the 2008 global recession, we still have not taken much lessons from that. And therefore, what is the response that we can have complementing the ongoing momentum, particularly from the perspective of a higher education research? We already see that there is a lot of global response over time, which is indicating through several of these events being organized globally. Particularly from the Terry School, the higher education institution learning and efforts we take 4 critical areas. One is the top-down approach to assist policy decision-making, that is through the capacity building and the deepening of the knowledge base through faculty development programs by other universities, policy briefs, and what we have also done is the Government of India DOPT sponsored first of its program on public policy and sustainable development, in which we had actually introduced a course, master's course on sustainable consumption and production, which is actually first course reflecting the developing countries' perspective. And this course itself has also led to another course on sustainable urbanization. In terms of second is the bottom-up efforts, where we are trying to sensitize future urban managers with an MTech program on urban development and management. Of course, the focus on advanced research, and finally the research-led advocacy. Terry University is the only one from India, which is part of an international universities climate alliance, which is 40 plus universities worldwide. And just to mention that this is what our late president had mentioned, that on one hand, over 1.25 billion people are still living in poverty. On the other hand, patterns of unsustainable production and consumption are critical. Based on that, we are looking at the consumer behavior response towards the existing policy landscape, which is particularly focused on these two SDGs 11 and 12. At Terry School, we are emphasizing mainly on also, in addition to the several sectors, on energy, environment, transport, and the built environment, which is also reflected by Niti Aayog, its emphasis in a post-COVID era on transport and the energy sector. This is what I was referring as an MTech program in urban development management, which was launched in 2013 and is taking an interdisciplinary approach. And unique thing is that students are actually exposed to work with the urban local bodies and parastatals, and these are some of the examples of what they have been doing with these cities in terms of its transition towards sustainability, resilience, and smartness. These are some of the kind of examples of our emphasis on research-led approach towards smart and sustainable cities, focus on inclusiveness in cities, the interface between ecology and competitiveness, emphasis on culture in urban planning, and so on and so forth, ultimately dealing with the urban conflicts. And what I understand is the knowledge-based and action-oriented partnerships with cities is really, really vital. And that is where I'm very happy this particular webinar is laying the emphasis on in a post-COVID era. So I would like to end with and thank you all with these two quotes from Mahatma Gandhi. One is that reduce the resource intensity of production, undertake new patterns with reduced levels of consumption, and change what is consumed and by whom, which is very critical in the context of urban resilience. And finally, sustainability will come a full circle only when local knowledge is recognized and given its due importance. So thank you very much, Soumya, and thank you if I have overstepped on the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shalin Singhal. I think that was a very important voice that we would want to listen to, that we wanted to listen to, and very heartening to see the programs that have come up. Everything that you have mentioned, it looks at the challenges that the cities are facing today, and it addresses the challenges that the cities are facing today, and that is the relevance and that is the need of the hour. So very heartening to see that. You've brought in the aspects of working with citizens and the culture of the city. We see in several instances that those are aspects that make or break all the policies and programs that are put together with a lot of good intentions, but ultimately it is that culture and the involvement of the citizenry that becomes crucial. So thank you for touching upon these topics, and we look forward to further deliberations. I think with this, I will call to a close the session on urban resilience, and we will move on to the next session. I will call upon my colleague, Ms. Avantika, to take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Soumya.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Avantika Arjuna from ICLE South Asia. And now we move on to the next session, the third session on sustainable transport. And today we have 4 distinguished guests with us who all come from different backgrounds, but they all have been working very extensively on the transport sector. I'll be calling Mr. Raj Cherubal, who is the CEO from Chennai Smart City, and Mr. Mangesh Dhinge, who are the speakers. Then later on, we'll be having the discussants, Mr. Amit Bhatt and Ms. Pranjali Deshpande. After the speakers speak in, I would request the speakers to generally talk about the challenges which they've been facing. Basically, we know that cities like Chennai and Pune have been working a lot, and they've been up on the forefront when we talk about sustainable transport, like on bicycling, or also a city like Pune has also been working on transport and mobility for young children also. And I would request the speakers to be very, very brief, and followed by that, I would also request them to relate their talk with the ongoing initiatives of the government related to the transport sector, like the cities project, the smart city project, and the FAME scheme. With this, I would invite Mr. Raj. I don't see him as a panelist yet.
I think I just joined as a panelist.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Sure, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Thank you for joining us.
So yeah, hi. I'm on a bike, so I think you can hear the noise in the background. So I'll be brief. I think all the people on the panel and the audience know our problem, so it's nothing new. So what my argument is, I think it was Miss Nivedita from earlier speaker. I think our basic problem is capacity, and one of the, if you look at it in a more fundamental way, I think our cities are highly centralized. So there is no local level ability to figure out what the problem is and to come up with integrated solutions. And I'll quickly run through it, and this is true in pretty much every city. So typically what I point out is that if there is a congestion in a particular junction, in an advanced city, they'll immediately suggest that, okay, metro rail, buses, congestion charge, parking, route rationalization, all these sophisticated so-called sustainable transport mechanisms are put into play. And then there is a debate whether you do BRT, should we continue with metro rail, or should we do more buses in that route, or whatever. I mean, congestion charge, should the price go up or down? But in a third world country like ours, and I use the word third world with on purpose, because we have to get it through our thinking that we are third world. I mean, in every planning and every way, we are third world. So every time I hear the word resilience and climate change, it gets even more, how do I say, difficult, because we have difficulty doing basic things. Now we are talking about resilience and climate change, etc., which I mean, it's nice seminar topics, but on the ground, I'm not sure how much impact all those words actually make. And so anyway, coming back to the point, the junction is congested. So immediately third world solution is to say a flyover or road widening or get rid of the footpath. So even the fundamental thinking has not sunk in. I mean, Chennai, of course, has made some advance. I'm sure Pune and certain other cities have made some quite a bit of advance. Chennai, at least the discussion is on two sides. On one side, there is tremendous progress made in terms of public transport discussion, and I'll get to that in a few seconds. But at the same time, the hangover, the off flyovers and road widening, etc., is still there. And it's a reflection on the reality, because we haven't done anything integrated to reduce the number of cars on the road, etc. So I think the challenges are huge. I mean, to put it very, very mildly. But the good news, at least in Chennai, is that because of the quite a bit of success in some of our projects, not just Smart City, but various other departments, the good news is World Bank is coming to Chennai in a pretty big way. I mean, instead of doing ETBT projects, Chennai will be a city partner where they bring in $1 billion, and I think the state government is supposed to invest 500 million. That's almost 10,000 crores in water and in transport. And it is not simply about projects or buying buses. It is also about institutional changes. So, for example, like I mentioned, in a first world country, the reason they are able to immediately talk about buses and congestion charge is not because they're any smarter than us. It's just that they have institutions. Like, for example, London has Transport for London, Singapore has the Land Transport Authority, who is able to step above the corporation flyover talk, or a bus guy says, look, I don't have any money to buy buses, and look at it more from an integrated citywide perspective to say, okay, if there is a problem, how do we spend public money to come up with the best sustainable solution? So that kind of institutional setup is what makes London, London, or Paris, Paris. And the idea of the city partnership is to start doing those kinds of things so that money starts flowing through these institutions, which can then say, okay, do we do a flyover or do we buy 10 buses? Or do we do capacity building for the metro rail and integration, multimodal integration? Or do we do road widening? You know, these are fundamental questions that every city goes through, whether it's Houston or Hong Kong. So we will go through it. And luckily, Chennai has been going through this for the last 10, 15 years, thanks to various organizations, both inside the government and outside, NGOs and so on. So I think we are at a very, very good spot, however frustrating it may be. Chennai is in a pretty good space right now in terms of sustainable transport. And I'm sincerely hoping that in the next let's say 1 to 5 years, we'll be able to do some pretty good fundamental work so that Chennai can at least start setting some examples for itself and for others. And obviously we'll learn from others. Like for example, when we did our plaza and so on, we went to Pune, we went to Bangalore. I mean, all the skepticism that we had saying, what kind of a fool reduces carriageway and creates plazas? You know, when you go see a Bangalore or a Pune do it, the system and the engineers from our side also starts realizing, okay, this is something that can be done beautifully. So because of the success of plaza and so on, everybody wants a plaza in front of their house now in Chennai. At least that's the claim, right? But also very importantly, I'll quickly finish this last statement is, there are, we cannot, it's painful process of building strategic building blocks. That's the only way I'm able to put it. That is, without parking management, no point talking about cycle track, okay? Because we are hardly able to build a footpath without somebody encroaching upon it. And the moment you build a footpath and somebody encroaches, media, public, and understandably gets very annoyed, saying that what kind of a fool builds a footpath when you can maintain it. Now, NGO circles, seminar circles, we start talking about cycle track and so on. And my cautionary note to all my friends who, I'm a big fan of cycling. It's not like I'm anti-cycling. It's just that without those other building blocks, which is more painful than simply talking about cycling, which is parking management system and various, maybe thought of congestion charges, maybe intelligent transport system, whereby you cut a red light, you will get a ticket, you will go to jail. You know, you speed, you will get a ticket before you get to the next junction. In a city of 8 million people like Chennai, with, I mean, lakhs and lakhs of cars on the road, we cannot anymore live in a fantasy world. We have to do some hardcore work on the ground to put enforcement in place. And enforcement cannot be simply saying public is not good, or, you know, Chennai people are not good, or Indians are not good, or police is not good. We cannot expect people to simply use their goodwill and moral or ethics to do enforcement. It has to be systems. This is why Singapore is Singapore. So I think I'll conclude by saying, you want to get to sustainable transport, let us do the dirty work of actually doing cameras to catch speeding or, you know, red light cutting, and help police enforce, help corporation and police do parking management, which also brings in crores and crores of money, for example, for the city. All these different pieces has to be done for us to be able to enjoy a simple footpath like the way you would have done in a Hong Kong or in a Paris. So we have a long way to go, but I'm sure Chennai and a few cities, we are in a better spot than many other parts. So I'll stop with that.
Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate you joining us outside when you're there in the field, and you've taken out time to speak to us. And also thank you very much for instigating us with your ideas. And I believe when we move on to the discussions, we'll definitely have some answers to the questions raised by you. Now, I would request Mr. Mangesh Thige from Pune Municipal Corporation to come and share his views and about the works which they've been doing in Pune related to sustainable transport.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for inviting Pune City on this forum. I'll be sharing the story of Pune City with respect to sustainable mobility. As we see, the municipal corporation, Pune City, has been seeing a lot of transformation in terms of mobility. In 70s, 80s, it was known as Cycle City. in 80s, 90s became moped city, and now it's almost a mixed mode vehicles. When we look at the growth of city, how does the city grow in terms of the vehicles? So here we have 4.1 million vehicles for a population of 3.4 million. So the ratio of people to vehicle is more than 1. And this is what makes Pune city quite an important city for understanding the mobility aspects. And when we look at the area of Pune city, as I'm talking to you, as of now, it's 331 square kilometer, but just a few days ago, 23 more villages got added in city, and now the city area has gone up to 511 square kilometer. So as we try to fight the challenges of mobility and other infrastructure within the cities keep growing. And in today's webinar, we have heard a lot about the peri-urban challenges. This is the same story with the Pune city as well. Well, we did our GHG emission inventory way back in 2012, which Terry did, and again in 2017 by ICLEI, and our per capita emission way back in 2012 was 1.46 ton per capita, and in 2017 it was 1.64. When we did the smart city engagement, around 0.3 million people were engaged. We did survey with this quantum of people, and in 2 months' time, we came up with this analysis where everybody related to transport and mobility as their highest issue for the city. And from taking cues from that kind of survey, we devised our vision statement, which says that Pune aspires to become one of the most livable cities in India by saving its core infrastructure issues in a future-proof way and making its neighborhood beautiful, clean, green, and livable. So to start journey of the sustainable mobility, we first take cues from the various policies which are there in India, the National Urban Transport Policy, the Electric Mobility Mission, the FAME, the Green Mobility Scheme, and so on. And how do we adopt these policies or customize these policies to Pune city? There requires a lot of interaction, and we have a very good ecosystem of various experts, NGOs within the city, and the municipal corporation, hand in hand with all these experts, did a lot of discussion, and then we prepared our policies for Pune city. So number one was under 100 Resilient Cities program, we prepared the Pune Resilience Strategy. And this is a very good document which gives a long-term vision towards the sustainable growth of Pune city. And when we look at the sustainable transport journey, the NMT timeline, various studies which were done earlier, we took into consideration all those facts and figures about mobility. For example, the comprehensive mobility plan done in 2008 as well as in 2018. And then we prepared the Walk Smart pedestrian policy. We also have the Pune Streets program. Then Pune city specifically has got the urban street design guidelines, which are approved by the general body of municipal corporation. And now all the streets of Pune are being retrofitted as per these guidelines which are adopted. We have a parking policy, but we have challenges within this policy. We have comprehensive bicycle plan, public bicycle sharing scheme, and all these urban street programs. We have got Urban 95 program, which is a child-friendly city program with Bernard Van Leyen Foundation, and we are integrating the child-friendly elements into the various street design works that we are doing. To show you an example of the various actions taken by Pune city, here we can see a particular road taken under the Pune Smart City program. So these are the photograph of the before and after streets which were undertaken by Smart City, and this is in the Smart City area known as Aund Baner Balewadi. All these Pune street design guidelines, all the elements are very meticulously and thoughtfully worked out to really transform the Indian city scenario, the roads into all these components that you see as bollards, tabletop crossing, refuge islands, and specifically focusing on the pedestrian, the safety of the pedestrian. Under the Pune Street Smart City program, we did this particular road in Aund, and it was very difficult for us to really integrate the wide footpath right in front of the shops. We did a lot of deliberations with these shopkeepers, and ultimately, with a lot of discussion, we could really make this wide footpath available for the pedestrian. And this was a good learning experience for us, because taking cues from what we did in the smart city area, we've also taken the widening of footpath area within the heart of the city, and some of the roads are taken by municipal corporation. So we plan to retrofit 100 kilometers of street at various locations all across the city. And these are the various elements. For example, this photograph is right from the heart of the city, where there's a road, Jangli Maharaj Road, and this was transformed from a very dense traffic to a wide footpath, as well as sit-outs, and even infrastructure for cyclists also. So here you can see that this gives a very live example to the citizen of Pune to understand what is all this Pune street program about, and how are we transforming the cities. So once we have a good pilot example at few locations, the various other wards and the politicians of the other areas also start demanding such kind of infrastructure, because it gives a very realistic view of what we are doing about. So as we design these, we are also into urban, one of the urban 95 city, and we can see that a lot of infrastructure for children under 5 years age is put up. How does the city become child friendly? And we have learning from these programs, and slowly we are integrating various elements of these smart city into our day-to-day work of redesigning our streets, as well as in the DSR, that is the Pune cities estimates and tenders that we prepare. We have the district scheduled rates. So these elements have been totally included in the scheduled rates. Well, with parking, this is a parking policy. We aim to put up a pay and park facility. There has been opposition, and but there have been success stories as well. So it's a mix of the two, but slowly, as we are inching forward towards making all these roads into a pay and park, we see a great success in future. In terms of mass transport system, we see that Pune Metro, we are coming up with a 33 kilometer of two major corridors, and also BRT is implemented in the city in a few stretches. Well, in terms of the electric mobility, Pune city from past around 1.5 years have been successfully running 150 electric buses, and people have accepted these buses very well. They're comfortable, they are noiseless, no air pollution, and at the same rate as the normal bus. So looking at this success, recently we ordered 350 more buses. So out of around 2,500 bus fleet in Pune city, around 500 electric buses is our target. And on the bottom right corner, you see is the charging infrastructure of these electric buses, which are on two bus depots, major bus depots of Pune city. So we are all geared up for more number of electric buses. And with respect to fossil fuel, around 70% of these bus fleet is already running on CNG as well. So to look into the air pollution aspects, we are Pune city is one among the 123 non-attainment cities, and under NCAP we have prepared the national the Pune City Air Quality Action Plan, and this plan is in progress. Pune city has been receiving a lot of delegates from various cities and organizations, and we are doing a lot of peer-to-peer discussions with various cities. We also get to learn from other cities as well. Well, Pune city received the Sustainable Urban Transport Award in 2020, and looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, as I mentioned earlier, we have these Sustainable Development Goals as an essential element into the reporting of the Environment Status Report, which we prepare every year. And in addition to this, we also got 4-star rating under Climate Smart City Assessment Framework under Niti Aayog. And around 2 months ago, we also have bidded for the Bloomberg Philanthropies. And the idea that Pune City has pitched up is how does the city get EV ready? And we are in the first phase of that pilot stretch. So out of 630 cities, we were selected amongst the 50. And after the pilot stretch study gets over, we are likely to be in the first 15. So hoping to receive the grants from Bloomberg Philanthropies. How does the city get EV ready? So this is how we are moving towards the sustainable mobility. In a very short few slides, I wanted to share what Pune City has done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the beautiful presentation. I think there's a lot of learning which needs to be done for all the cities, and Pune is one of the city which is kind of a lighthouse city for others to refer to. And we'll come back with questions to you if there are any, and we would request you to stay back in the session. As we move further, I would invite the discussants, Mr. Amit and Ms. Pranjali. But before moving on that, I would request you to please, like we've heard from the two speakers just now from Chennai Municipal Corporation and from Pune Municipal Corporations, and you've seen the major challenges they've been facing. Like the Chennai CEO was referring to the issues, though the major issues of capacity and institutionalization, that how it becomes really difficult for the cities to implement projects. And at the same time, he was also referring to the support which Chennai is getting from World Bank and also from different NGOs. While we were looking at the case of Pune, we see a lot of NGOs and different organizations are supporting. But if you could reflect on the other cities, these are kind of metro cities which do get support. And but what about the other cities? If we can get some reflection from you about that also. With this, I would request Mr. Amit to reflect his views. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Avantika. And I think it was great to hear Raj and then also Mr. Mangesh. I think one is definitely we are seeing many such success stories coming from Indian cities. So Pune, Chennai, we already knew from this presentation. But we've also seen some great innovations coming from smaller cities like cities of Indore, Bhopal, Rajkot, you know. And what is interesting is the fact that a lot of leadership at these cities is now also making that kind of commitment to create change. Now, this is all great. But however, if you look at the entire landscape, I think these are still kind of a very small interventions compared to the problems that we are facing. So I think that's where we have to look at in a slightly larger perspective, right? So if you look at sustainable transport interventions can broadly be classified into one, which promotes sustainability, which is all the great thing that we talked about today, is how can you have more buses, how can you create more pedestrian-friendly streets, how can you encourage more walking and cycling, how can you promote zero emission. I think this is all great stuff and which we should continue to do. But we should also look at how can we also stop some of the not so great stuff which cities are doing, which is building more roads, building more flyovers, expanding cities to periphery. No, so those are the things that we have to kind of, in a way, work. How can we kind of limit to some of these? And that's where I think the balance has to be found. And so I think what is really interesting of the fact is, how can we move from this piecemeal based approach, which is 10, 20 kilometers of BRT, maybe one line of metro, maybe 15, 20 kilometers of complete streets, into a slightly more systemic change of integrated transportation planning. And this is where I think we'll have to do a lot more than we are. If you look at the National Urban Transport Policy, almost 15 years back when it came out, it really championed the cause of Unified Metropolitan Transport Authority, UMTA, as we call it. One agency does all the transport planning for the city and the region. 15, 16 years later, we are still talking about UMTA. While some cities have gone and created UMTA, but a lot of the UMTA that we see in our cities is mostly on paper without having enough power to create the change that you want. So one is institutional fragmentation. So Delhi, where I am speaking from currently, anywhere between 18 to 20 agencies are responsible for transport, for a provision of transport. Now that cannot happen. If you have 20 agencies planning and delivering transport, you can't have integrated transport system, right? So that's one. So institutionally, how can we create an integrated approach is something we have to look at. So that's point number one. Point number two is how do we look at sustainability in the overall scheme of things, right? I mean, if you look at some of the city budgets, the budget which is spent on sustainable transport, which is what we talked about, walking, cycling, and public transport, is far, far less than the budget that is spent on roads, flyovers, and bridges. So how can you then create a balance in terms of fiscal measures? So that's point number three. And point number two. And point number three, which is, well, I'll end my initial remark, is how do we measure? So what's the metrics of measurement of sustainable mobility? And that's something which cities unfortunately are not doing. So, and that's what I think we need not get into complex equations of carrying yearly surveys and all. There are some simple techniques through which we can measure sustainability, right? So few parameters that we can measure. One, let's measure how many road traffic deaths happen in our city. Right? So that's easy to measure and the data is available. So that's one. Road safety is one. Second is air quality. And we know transport has a huge role to play in terms of the quality of air we breathe. So air quality, a particular matter emission could be point number two. Point number three, we should actively start measuring modal split. And that will give us an indication whether the transport provision that we are making are really making any sense. And is the growth of personal automobile on the rise? So point number three is how do we measure the modal split? Point number four, we should measure travel speeds. And these are not vehicular speeds, but these are passenger speeds across the city. And so that's now point number four. And then point number four is using some metrics to measure the equity in the cities. So if you are able to manage and with some without not getting into the matrix which has 20 parameters, and all these 20 parameters all have four sub parameters, and that never happens. So if we start measuring the mobility, I think then we'll be able to manage the mobility well. If we are not, then we will continue fighting this piecemeal based approach, which is good, but then it doesn't give the required emphasis that we need in our cities. So yeah, I'll stop at this point for now.
Thank you, Amit. I think your points have been really useful. And now I would like to request Pranjali to share her thoughts.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. First of all, thanks for inviting me. And I think the earlier speakers have raised very valid questions. And I have some slides to talk about the same challenges and to see how big cities or maybe mid-sized cities are trying to work around it. So I'll just share my screen and a very few slides talking about it. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's coming up.
Taking time. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, now we can see.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Full screen? Yeah.
Yeah, full screen.
Okay. So I think the main thing which these cities, we can say best practices or even emerging best practices, what they have done is like their goal was very clear. So in terms of the goal, for example, Mangesh sir showed us like, what all things Pune is doing. So, and like where it started, he vaguely mentioned that there was a comprehensive mobility plan that talks about it. And it sets up a very right kind of a goal that, today there is a lot of dependency on the private vehicles, but the goal clearly says that by 2031, we should reduce this private vehicle dependency from 50% to just 10%. So the goal is very clear. So unless you have goal, you won't be able to do any progress, because then otherwise you will just do here and there, hodgepodge projects. So that's the reason, these cities have kept a very, we can say it is very ambitious goal, but at least goal is there. So number one is goal has to be there. Another thing is that, many cities struggle with, even after having goal, they still are not able to find the right kind of solution. Yeah, right, Amit was mentioning that cities are still building roads and flyovers. And why this is happening is, because the whole transportation planning is still around this very popular concept of passenger car units. Just count the number of vehicles, multiply it, project it, and then say that, oh, by after 10 years, it will be blah, blah, blah. And that's the reason we need to widen. And we forget the basic principle that we don't need to count the vehicles. Our NUTP is constantly telling us that count people and not vehicles. So the moment you switch this approach and the moment you start seeing people inside the vehicles or walking or cycling, then you will get totally different answers. So I think somewhere this cities which are are on the right track have somewhere understood this concept. Of course, there are hindrances, there are challenges. People are opposing these ideas of expanding footpaths and cycle track or expanding the BRT. Like in Pune, the BRT is constantly under discussion that whether it is good or bad, but still city is constantly pushing that we want to retain our BRT, we don't want to demolish it, we want to improve it, because we have understood the fact that bus carries more number of people than any other motor vehicles. So these fundamental principles, I think cities should adopt, and then they follow it. After that, there has to be a roadmap, whether it is of the public transport improvement, or whether how to expand road network, how to expand the NMT network, walking, cycling, or public spaces, whatever it could be. There has to be a proper roadmap that is based on the vision or the ultimate goal. And like Amit was mentioning, what about finances? What about the investments? I think this slide talks about it. So Pune, it was not that, Pune suddenly got a lot of money and that's the reason they did all these footpath and cycle track projects. It's not true. I mean, they just rearranged their priorities. You can see that right from 2015 to 2019, they changed their investment approach. So the blue band you can see is of the walk, bus and cycle infrastructure projects. And after 16, they changed their approach and decided that at least 50% of the total transport budget should go to walk, bus and cycle. And all those projects which you see today are happening under that budget. And once the standards have been set, it is very easy to follow, because every year city goes back to the last year's budgets and see, we decided to put so much into walk, now we'll increase it to XYZ%, etc., etc. And now we can see that it is increasing, or at least 50% is spent on the sustainable mobility projects. So number one is how to arrange finances is first change our own budget budget pattern. And number two is, like Raj was mentioning, maybe there are development banks, there are, there is funding available if you have will and if you have right kind of inclination. And it's not that only big cities can, get those fundings. Like we have some programs like, cities program on which I'm working. It is specific, it has a lot of cities which are mid-size. Like for example, Amritsar is one of that cities which has got funding for, shifting its diesel-oriented shared mobility and converting them into electric vehicles. Apart from that, I think when you start to achieve your goal, plans and policies also make a very they help to implement those projects. So just jumping into project might not help. For example, Pimpri Chinchwad, it's abutting Pune city. They are into this process of preparing Harit Setu, that is an NMT master plan for the entire city. And as a part of it, they also have their NMT policy now. They also have a committee that can advise these consultants and the team which is working on this Harit Setu project on how to go about it. So it's not just that, directly jumping to the projects by putting money will help. You need to have a holistic system. And like Raj was mentioning, what about institutional reforms? Of course, UMTA is very, very important, but whether you have UMTA or not is one question. But another, thing is that at the program team level, or at the people who are implementing these projects, at that level also institutional reforms are essential. For example, in Pune, they not just created this urban design guidelines, but they also have this NMT committee. So NMT committee talks about and considers all the participatory approach. They have NGOs who are working and promoting this sustainable mobility. They have traffic police in this committee. They have metro people. They call metro people and also try to understand what they are doing about NMT. So 2 days ago only we had our NMT committee meeting, and these committees also help the team to support their project. They help to understand and get the international best practices and share some knowledge around it. Also, in terms of the institutional reforms, you need to think about, what's happening across, in other cities, what are the best practices, how to design. I mean, if it is a road design project, you need to have urban designers, and not just hiring consultants will, you will do everything with the help of consultants. Somewhere you have to have your in-house experts. Somehow you need to improve and increase your internal capacity. So Pune also has their in-house urban design cell. And I think there are very few cities, maybe in Delhi, there are urban designers working inside the municipal corporation. And now Pune is one such city which has urban design cell. And these urban designers are helping various ward officers and engineers to design and prepare conceptual designs, conduct stakeholder consultations, etc. And also involving all the stakeholders, like, traffic police, for example. Every time we see that, whenever the project goes for the implementation, traffic police come and say that, hey, we don't want to increase the width of the footpath. There is a lot of traffic jam, etc., etc. So we somewhere also need to acknowledge their concerns, but also try to sensitize them that what is right for the city and why we are doing certain projects in a certain manner. So the capacity building of just in-house staff is not sufficient. You also need to think about the whole ecosystem which is around that project. And coming to the mid-size or small cities, this is an example of Amritsar Smart City. So Amritsar Smart City, under their cities program, which is AFD funded project, they are replacing their more than 10,000 diesel autos into electric auto rickshaws. And it's not just one-time program of, okay, you take money and then you replace your rickshaw and that's done. It's not like that. But as a part of the whole program, they are also formalizing the informal public transport, because unless you make institutional reforms, the program will not be sustainable. People will get subsidy and he will tomorrow sell it off, or he will do whatever. The service level benchmarks won't exist, etc., etc. And hence even the small cities are now thinking about those long-term sustainability of the project. So they have formed this transport committee, which have multiple government agencies representing there, and to ensure multi-agency coordination. And for the rickshaw drivers, they are in the process of forming this cooperative society of rickshaw drivers, where they will get united and the formalization can take place. So, these things, even small cities have started thinking around it. So we can say that these are some emerging practices that are there. And not just that, this cooperative society will also help to ensure that whether the service level benchmarks are followed or not, or what is happening with operations, how to monitor the services, what is happening with the social rights of these drivers as well. And it's an entire process. If participatory approach is not followed, I mean, if the corporation or the cities are, very secretive about it and they don't want to talk to people, I think the project won't receive any success. No need to talk much about it. Everyone knows that why it is important. And whenever these projects are done, a lot of times, we are being all mobility experts or environment experts, we sometimes tend to forget the social reforms. But I think they are equally important. For example, in cities program, the social reforms are planned in such a way that not just formalization, but also how the entire livelihood opportunities of this driver and driver's family can be improved is also well thought of. So it's not just giving one-time financial subsidy to these drivers, but they will also receive health insurance, medical facilities, some training to the drivers of how to talk to people, or maybe because it's also tourist city, if they have inclination, they can also do some foreign language course, or their family members can enroll to some courses, and then they can start earning in parallel to the rickshaw drivers driving. So these are like, some kind of social reforms also that are tied up to the mobility. So mobility is not just transport planning, but it also has a variety of things attached to it. And small cities are also now, we can say, following what big cities are doing, like, tactical urbanism. This is getting very popular these days, and people know that, trials help a lot in getting support from the stakeholders. So this is an example of Dehradun Smart City, and it's a small city. And they wanted to show this. It is also under the city's program of AFD, and they want to do a child-friendly footpath network in their area-based development. And as a part of it, they did this tactical interventions. And because it's a small city, it was the first kind of thing that any small city is doing this. So it received a lot of good response also. And they also learned that big cities might have a lot of resources, they might have a lot of materials available to conduct those trials, but they worked around it, and they found whatever is available locally, and they managed to do this tactical urbanism in whatever time frame they had. And it gave them a lot of confidence to move ahead, and it also showed the people staying nearby that, okay, it is possible, and that's the reason we should support it. And last thing, I think, if we have vision, if we have all the data, if we have policies, and when we go to the project implementation, I think we should not do any compromises. Just saying that, oh, road is narrow and that's why footpath is not possible. No, it's not. It is still possible. You have to you need to design in that manner that how not to make compromises if your goal is very, very clear. And then only implement the projects, not just go and jump to the project and then receive some feedback, and maybe there will be backlash, and then just everything will be again back to square one. That won't help. I think the entire process is equally important, right from the financial, institutional, social reforms, and then going to the projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranjali. Very useful points. I think points such as having a goal is very important before any city would, because there are many cities who keep on working on many things, but it becomes very difficult at the time of implementation. So having a clear goal and vision definitely help. And as Amit also said, it is very important to have a leadership, which also helps in timely implementation of projects. And as we move forward, Pranjali, we have a question coming up for you. You were talking about Amritsar city, wherein you said that under the cities program, they are planning to have electric vehicles, I think. Electric autos. So so they were wanting to know that because Amritsar is one kind of a city which few years back had very less public transport, and majorly people were depending upon auto rickshaws only, auto rickshaws or e-rickshaws. So the question is that what kind of initiatives have been taken to make people aware, to make the auto drivers aware, and how are we able to get the confidence of from the auto drivers to move towards this electric mobility?
Right. So this program has started last year only. So they had, so this program is kind of a different in the way it is getting implemented. So the idea was that, first create a concept note. So in the concept note, city decided that, okay, we want to replace the diesel auto rickshaws and convert them into electric auto rickshaws. And during 1 year or 1.5 years, they developed the entire concept note to the DPR. And then they got the funding. So it was a lot of time was also invested in developing that concept. And during that process, a lot of consultations were also held with the rickshaw drivers, so that they can understand, the city can understand what are their challenges, and how much they are earning, what impact they can have on their livelihoods, etc. And also in Amritsar, there is also BRT, but it is not in the entire city. It's in the one part of the city, and city is still a lot of dependencies there on the share rickshaws. Now here the issue was that there is a lot of conflict and competition between these two public transport services, and we know that it has to be integrated, and they should run as a complementary services and not as competitors. So one way of doing and achieving is also was to formalize first, gain confidence of the rickshaw drivers, because it can never happen that you build a BRT or you brought up a formal bus system and tomorrow on the next day the rickshaw drivers will disappear. That is not going to happen unless you talk to them, you involve them, you acknowledge their role in the entire mobility pyramid. It is not going to happen. So the city decided that, okay, before we move to this replacement of rickshaws, we need to first formalize them. We need to understand that, you know, we need to gain them the confidence that they are part of the city's system, and then only we can slowly negotiate and we can see how that integration can happen. And for that, formalization process has started, and even within that there were multiple options available. Some cities worldwide, like in Latin America, they adopt this corporatization structure, you know, where there is just one company under which these rickshaw operators operate, and then you bid or the whatever is there to this company, etc. But here, after a lot of studies and a lot of discussions, the city decided to go with this cooperative culture, where the rickshaw drivers will also feel some kind of entrepreneurship, and but they will be still united, they will be still answerable, and there will be some representatives whom the city can talk to. So this is how the 1 year of maturation phase helped them to, work around the challenges and to get the support of the rickshaw drivers. And the recently, I think in around 2-3 months ago, they have filed this or submitted their application of formation of the society. So once the cooperative society is formed, they will get more and more members, and once the members are there, then only this subsidy and other social livelihood benefit program will start. So this is how the city is moving towards achieving their electrification goal.
Okay, thank you for the comprehensive response. And yes, we do agree that spending more time in the city and doing lots and lots of consultations definitely help. Now, there's a question for Amit. Though he's already spoken about it, but there's a question which says that travel demand in cities, it is increasing, and it is also projected to increase. It keeps on increasing. Then, and we also know that the capacity of the cities is less. Then what? How would you reflect that? What should the cities do to manage that with the increasing travel demand every day?
So there are ways and means to look at travel demand, right? So one, we have to understand if the city is witnessing a longer travel demand, and the travel demand could be in terms of more number of trips, or it could be in terms of the length of the trips, right? So there are two ways through which the travel demand can increase. Now, one of the reasons why we see increased in trip length is most of the cities are, the newer urban expansions are being planned in a single use land use fashion, which means you have one big area of residential, then you have another big area of institutional, then you have big residential area, and so on and so forth. So one way to address this is by integrating land use planning, which is how can we then create cities which are slightly more compact, which are connected, and which are coordinated cities. So that requires a land use planning. And just for an example, for people who are familiar with Delhi, so Delhi has a sub-city called Dwarka, which has been planned for a population about 1 million. And none of the people residing in Dwarka actually work in Dwarka because there's no commercial complexes or institutional land uses. So either people travel 15-20 kilometers to Delhi, or they go 15 to 20 kilometers to Gurgaon, or they go another 20-25 kilometers to New Delhi, a central area. The question is, why can't we create cities which have mixed uses, which means you have residential, you have institutional, you have commercial, you have all other categories. So if you plan in that manner, then the distance of the trips will definitely decrease. The second is more of the work number of trips. Now, bulk of the trips that we see, if you see any mobility profile of a city, 60-65% of the trips are work trips, right? And again, the question goes back to the same. How can we create this? So to understand this question, I think one is that if we look at our 2011 census data, and this is not any simple survey, it is census of the nation. And it gives very interesting result. And all these results, which will quickly present, is for people who are neither employed in agriculture nor in household industry. So 30% Indians don't travel to work because they work centers and residential is in very close proximity, right? So that's 30%. 23% Indians actually walk to work. Another 13% use bicycles or two-wheelers. Car, which is synonymous with our work trips, is only 3% in the country. And taxis are another 3%. So 97% of our trip is non-car trips in urban areas to work. The question is, are we giving enough recognition, spaces in our design? No. If we are able to do, I think we will be able to do much better chance of how people commute to work. Because the moment people get money, they will shift from bicycles to two-wheelers, two-wheelers to car, and then to bigger car. And believe me, no matter how much road you expand, you just cannot solve the problem of congestion because we don't even have space to accommodate everyone if they start moving by cars.
Thank you, Amit. I think, yes, that answers the question. And one last question I think we have for Mr. Mangesh Dhige. The question for you is, what kind of initiatives have been taken by Pune Municipal Corporation to for the transport sector, looking at the COVID situation?
During the COVID situation, we had deployed the municipal corporation, the municipal transport buses for the employees who are going for the COVID duty. But at the same time, I mean, it was not allowed for the other citizens. But we took that as a challenge to help citizens move and help city cope up with COVID. But also during the COVID situation, the other thing we did is we did the environmental monitoring and air pollution monitoring to understand a kind of lab situation where what if all the vehicles on the road disappear? So what is the consequence on the air quality? So we got good results from that, and that is making us understand the emission inventory aspect of air pollution of Pune city.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I think now we've come. Are there any other questions? I don't see any other questions. Okay, so now I would request, I think we've come at towards the end of this technical session, and it has indeed been really a great session to hear from all four speakers. And I would now pass on to my colleague Keshav to ask to go for the concluding session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Avantika, and all the excellent presenters for your very useful and useful insights on the urban transportation for the sustainable transportation. Now, basically, before we move to the closing remarks, I just want to quickly take an opportunity to summarize what we have discussed this morning. So in the opening session, like we have heard, there are three key words that we have heard from all the speakers: actions and implementation and scaling up. So these are the three quick summary words from the opening session that we heard and we agreed upon. And in the first session on the sustainable urban development and internal migration, we understood and recognized that there's a lot more need to be done, and migrants need to be recognized as an important economic constituent. And there's a whole lot of focus required on data and education that should be at the center of our focus. And of course, addressing internal migration has to be a collective effort. So all the stakeholders, including non-governmental institutions, should also be part of the solution in terms of doing the education and awareness campaign. And we need to basically bring the migrants at the center of policy discourse. So, and also we understood how important the local bodies' role in terms of addressing the migrants' issues, and also interface between unorganized and migrant workers. So these are the quick summary from technical session 1, and of course these are just a quick highlight, but we of course will have a detailed outcome report from the workshop that we will send it to all of our attendees and the speakers and discussants. Then we had session 2 on urban climate resilience, which focused upon we had few examples from Surat on how they have implemented, they prepared their climate action report and also started implementing some of the priority interventions through model of shared learning and planning towards climate resilient future. and which has been basically inspiration for a lot of other Indian cities to how to integrate the systematic planning towards climate action, resilient future. And we also understood how policies are important to ensure climate resilience for not only for our urban areas, but also peri-urban areas. And how important is bottom-up efforts to sensitize our future urban managers. So multi-level training and capacity building require a totally new level of commitment and dedication. And we also heard from the academic institution on the role of advanced research on policy and actions. So these are the quick summary points from the session 2, and then session 3 basically just now had. Cities are struggling with the basic fundamental issues around road widening and public transport. That should be our focus. Of course, there are examples for Chennai and Pune in India, which has acted as a lighthouse and model cities for others to follow. But yes, lot more need to be done in terms of institutional management and strengthening. If we are following the international best practices. There are various painful building blocks around PBS system, non-motorized transportation and public transport that need to be addressed first. There are other examples also in India from tier 2 cities like Indore, Bhopal, Rajkot, which also started working upon sustainable transportation. It need to be encouraged and supported whatever way we can. And also we have heard the importance of measurement of metrics for transport sector, how we can define those KPIs and have a common reporting and then performance evaluation of our cities on air quality and calculating model split and all those passenger speeds and all. And there is also we have heard from Panjali on how important it is to define a goal for sustainable transport and adopting a systematic approach towards a sustainable transport. So these are the quick summary. I'm sure there are a lot of other things which has not been covered in this quick summary, but like I said, we are planning to have an outcome report for this webinar, and which we will circulate to all of our attendees and speakers in the coming days. So again, I want to thank each and everybody for their active participation, to all the speakers and to discussion for their insightful inputs. I also want to thank KAS Singapore for their support and collaboration on this series of webinar. We have Ms. Megha also from KAS Singapore. May I invite her to kindly give a closing remark? Ms. Megha, floor is yours.
Thank you, Keshav. Firstly, a big thank you to all of you for joining us today. KASpaces is mainly about sharing a space between political actors and civil society actors and other actors in the society, so that together we can achieve the SDGs. The 10 conferences will happen across South and Southeast Asia. So if you think there is any city that you would like to learn from, any aspect of any city that you would like to know, please drop in a note to Keshav, is coordinating everything. So I would like to invite you for the other webinars, because we see that every city has its unique problem, but also very similar problems. So I think we can all learn from each other, and that is what is KASpaces about. Our next webinar will be in Bhutan, and also followed by a series of webinars in Southeast Asia. So please do let us know. There's much to learn from India. So I think we're going to take a lot of data and a lot of information from here and share it with the rest of Asia. And we seriously hope that you all enjoyed the sharing as much as we did. And without adding anything more, I would just like to thank you all again and just say that please join us for the other webinars, because while cities have very unique problems, and they also have a lot of similar problems. And I think the whole aim is that similar problems, if we can solve with similar solutions or learn from each other, there's nothing like it. And it will also accelerate the process to achieve the SDGs. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you on behalf of KAS and also of the organizing team. And I would also like to thank Imani, Keshav, and the entire team of ICLAI for hosting this thing. Thank you so much. Over to you, Keshav.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Megha, for excellent closing remarks. So, like we said, we invite all of you to kindly join our next series workshop. So, we are doing 22nd of July, the Bhutan KAS workshop, and then in series, a lot of other workshops are planned across Asia Pacific. So, if you are interested to learn about those countries' dynamics and their problem and issues, and best practices, of course, you're most invited to welcome and attend and participate in the discussions. And of course, like we said, we'll get back to you in the future course with the detailed outcome report, and you may basically reflect further upon it. Do we have Mr. Imani Kumar? Would you like to say a few words before we close? Soumya, Ms. Soumya, you are there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Keshav. Yeah, it's been a pleasure listening to all the voices and hearing from the cities as well as from the professionals, and we'll keep the dialogue up and look forward to seeing all of you in the next session. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megha.